Hey guys, tonight we ease into a time when privacy was not just rare, it was nearly unimaginable. Think of this: the stone walls of a medieval village cottage are thick and damp, often sweating from the cold. The fire in the hearth dies down hours before dawn. The wind sneaks in through warped shutters, and your straw stuffed bedding lies stiff in the corner, barely insulating you from the chill that gnaws at your bones. What do? You huddle, not just with your family, but with neighbors, apprentices, sometimes even travelers who have nowhere else to go. It wasn't just tradition, it was how you stayed alive. You see, the quiet truth is that before modern heating and personal space, the human bed was more survival gear than sanctuary. It wasn't a place of retreat, it was a warm human pile of elbows, breath, and snoring noses sometimes stranger than dreams themselves. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The walls creak. You're already in the bed before supper ends because you have no lamp, no firewood left, and no reason to sit up in the darkness. And you're not alone. A cousin is curled up at your feet, and your uncle, the one who smells faintly of pickled onions and shoe leather, wheezes inches from your face. You've never liked his snore. It comes in like a goat braying underwater, but here he is, your heat source for the night. This is the daily unspoken logic of medieval night's warmth before dignity. Beds weren't symbols of wealth unless they were raised, carved, and curtained. For the majority, they were simply communal warmth centers. The word bedfellow wasn't poetic, it was literal. You shared that space whether you wanted to or not. Even those who could afford a frame and mattress rarely got solitude. A wooden bed with a rope support was often just big enough for 3 people lying shoulder to shoulder. And if one turned, the others did too, a synchronized rotation like sausages on a spit. And here's the kicker: most beds were never meant for one person. They were built wide, not long, because people slept half sitting, propped up on bolsters. Lying fully flat was considered bad for the humors your body's precious fluids might sink to the wrong places. So you sat upright in bed, cramped with your knees bent, listening to your bedmates breathe, murmur, or sometimes argue about who stole the warm patch. The big bed of a household, especially in peasant cottages, was a multi-use platform. During the day, it held bundles, infants, or tools. At night, it held humans, whoever needed it most. Even when children grew into adults, there wasn't an automatic right to a room of one's own. You bunked in with your siblings, your elderly, and sometimes your livestock. Not joking. Calves or sickly lambs might sleep at the edge of the bedding, because a warm body was a warm body. What's quietly amusing is that for all the grand portraits of kings lying in silken solitude, even royalty didn't sleep alone. Monarchs might have ornate bedchambers, but they still shared sleeping space with advisors, bodyguards, or even favored courtiers. The warmth principle applied upward too, alongside political caution. Many rulers, vulnerable at night, kept someone nearby, not just for protection, but to witness they weren't murdered in their sleep. Historians still argue whether this was more about trust or vanity. But regardless, you can imagine the oddness of having to whisper state secrets before dozing off under a velvet canopy, while someone snoozed next to you holding a sword. Now, imagine the seasonal rhythms. In winter, the idea of sleeping alone would seem masochistic. You'd pile into the shared bed in layers 2, 3, even 4 people. Mothers might keep newborns pressed against their skin under woolen wraps, with toddlers clinging like barnacles to thighs and arms. Summer brought a cruel twist. Warmth remained necessary, but so did airflow. You might be lucky to sleep on a pallet near a door or window, but odds are, you're still pressed between someone's ribs and someone else's knees. Body heat turns sour fast in warm weather. You feel every breath, every twitch, every dream mumbled into your scalp. There's a strange comfort in this, and a strangeness too, being so physically intimate with people you may barely know. In some ways, you're more known to them than you'd like. You wake to the wet smell of their morning breath, to their sighs, to the awkward apology if their elbow found your face in the night. And no one ever asks if this is okay. It simply is. Beds weren't static either. You might not sleep in the same spot every night. Rotations happened. Apprentices earned sleeping rights by rank. A newcomer to the house might spend a few weeks on the floor, then earn a space near the edge, and finally, if well-liked, be granted the warm center. The center was prime real estate. It meant you were less likely to freeze, less likely to be bumped off the edge, and possibly more protected from nocturnal rodents skittering across the rafters and floorboards. Oh yes, rats were an ever-present part of medieval slumber. Scratching, nibbling, scurrying, some even learned to tug at loose linens to make nests. One fringe account from a 13th century Flemish household noted a child who regularly woke to find a small rat sleeping in her hair. Whether true or not, it paints a vivid picture. And if you think these nightly routines were without humor, you'd be wrong. People joked, teased, made flatulence a sport. If someone snored too loudly, another might pinch their nose or throw a bit of hay in protest. If you hogged the blanket, you'd be slapped in the dark. If you dreamed aloud, your mumblings might be repeated back to you the next morning. With great amusement and slight exaggeration, the bed wasn't just for sleep, it was a village comedy club, confessional booth, and warming chamber all in one. The shared human condition compressed into a ticking bundle of straw and breath. Still, for all the laughter, for all the strange intimacy and nightly chaos, there's an edge of tenderness here. You don't always love the people you sleep beside, but you trust them, or at least, you trust their presence more than the alternative. Alone, you'd shiver. Alone, you might hear wolves, or worse, men. Alone, you might not wake at all. The bed, lumpy and loud, was protection. It was belonging, a physical reminder that no one survives the night entirely by themselves. You shuffle awake, if you ever truly slept, and feel the stiffness in your back from a night pressed against uneven straw. It crunches faintly beneath you with each breath, and you realize someone's foot is still wedged under your hip. Probably Thomas, the butcher's boy, who always sneaks into the common bed after his late shift. The straw pokes through the thin linen sheet like it's trying to escape. You shift slightly and feel another body stir beside you. Someone you don't recognize. That's common. In medieval life, especially in towns or crowded villages, bedding wasn't about who you knew, it was about who got there before the door was barred. The idea of my bed didn't apply to you unless you were a noble or obscenely wealthy. What you had was a place in the bed, a shared structure, usually low to the ground, wide rather than long, with wooden slats or ropes holding up a coarse sack stuffed with hay, feathers, or rags. And no one cared who laid down first, just that you made room for the next body that wandered in. These were the communal mattresses of medieval life, soaked in the smells of sweat, damp wool, leftover food, and sometimes worse. The peasant's bed was rarely replaced. Its frame might last a generation, its stuffing, maybe a season if you were lucky. Over time, the stuffing flattened unevenly, creating dips that funneled sleepers toward each other like a human gravity well. No matter how you arranged yourself, you always ended up skin to skin or breath to back with someone else by morning. The richer sort didn't necessarily fare better. While they may have had downstuffed mattresses and embroidered linens, they also attracted more parasites, more servants bustling in and out, and far more people requesting a spot beside them out of loyalty, duty, or opportunism. Historians still debate whether it was better to sleep poor and cold, or wealthy and crawled over. Now imagine you're a traveling merchant stopping at an inn. The fire in the hearth is low, the ale is flat, and the barkeep points you to an upstairs room that smells faintly of boiled cabbage and something you'd rather not name. The bed turns out to be a wide, low platform against the wall, with maybe 2 or 3 people already in it, snoring, muttering, clutching their cloaks. You know the custom. You lift your cloak, wedge yourself in, and hope no one's drunk enough to roll onto you. No one speaks. No one asks. It's just what people do. Inns in the medieval period rarely provided private sleeping quarters unless you were rich enough to bribe for the best chamber. The rest of the travelers, pilgrims, journeymen, traders slept together like strangers on a bench. It wasn't unusual to wake and find someone else's belongings under your arm or someone else's child curled against your side. And while it may sound absurd to modern ears, this was comfort. The shared body heat meant survival in winter, especially in colder regions with damp air and minimal insulation. But even beyond the practical, There was something deeply ingrained about the act of sleeping beside others, part of the social fabric. To share a bed was to share a moment in time, even if fleeting. Sometimes, those who snuck away into solitude were seen with suspicion. What did they have to hide? Who would willingly sleep alone? There are even church records of people being fined or reprimanded for turning away a traveler in need of a warm corner in their bed. Hospitality was tied to shared warmth. A refusal could mark you as inhospitable or worse, unchristian. Of course, not every shared mattress was a peaceful snuggle. Disputes happened, elbow jabs escalated into whispered insults. Someone snored too loud. Another muttered blasphemy in his sleep. Drunken brawls erupted when a foot found the wrong shin. One especially quirky account from a 14th century innkeeper in York described how two traveling performers argued all night because one kept reciting lines from a morality play in his sleep. The other claimed he couldn't rest with that much unsolicited theater. They both ended up sleeping in the stables by morning. The story made its rounds for years. You still hear it if you ask the right innkeeper. Then there's the politics of position. Not everyone got the center. The edges were colder, draftier, and more vulnerable to rodents. If you were new, of lower status, or unlucky, that's where you'd be. Closer to the damp wall, farther from the fire, closer to the door and its endless creaks. Children and elders were often placed in the middle, pressed between sturdier bodies, while stronger folk took the perimeter as both shield and heat source. The center wasn't just warmer, it was safer. Fewer rats, fewer accidental kicks, better dreams, maybe. If you moved too much or claimed too much space, someone would grunt and nudge you into your proper slot. It was like being part of a living game board, where the rules were unwritten but rigidly enforced through nudges and coughs. You'd be surprised, too, at the level of trust required to sleep beside strangers. There's no locked door. Your pouch of coins rests in your sock, your knife under your head. You sleep with one eye closed and one hand curled. If someone shifts too quickly beside you, you tense. If someone breathes too evenly, you wonder if they're faking it, waiting for you to doze off so they can rifle through your bag. And yet, most nights pass without incident. A communal understanding: don't steal, don't grope, don't wake the snorer unless it's your turn to be kicked. There's even a strange etiquette to the shared cough. Everyone seems to do it in rounds. Not all at once, as if your lungs wait politely for their turn to be loud. In this hay-filled ecosystem, boundaries blur. You learn to sleep with someone's breath in your ear. You adapt to strange scents, to heavy limbs, to bodies that twitch and flinch in dreams. The mattress becomes a parliament of unconsciousness. You learn which creaks in the frame mean someone rolled over, and which means someone's sneaking out. You stop reacting to the rustle of mice or the distant bark of a dog. Instead, your world contracts into the 2 feet of straw and cloth around you, a microcosm of warmth and survival. And when morning comes, no one lingers. The bed empties quickly. People rub their eyes, pull on boots, stretch out cramped joints, and step away. There are chores to do, paths to travel, bread to buy. No one talks about the night. It passes like weather shared, but not remembered in detail. Maybe someone jokes about the snoring. Maybe someone finds a flea bite behind their ear. But mostly, the bed returns to what it is by daylight, a wooden frame with some rumpled cloth. Nothing personal, nothing permanent. You'll be back tonight. You'll curl in again beside someone new. And once again, you'll give yourself to the quiet compromise of shared sleep. You don't own a bed. That fact alone, in your medieval life, isn't shameful, it's just normal. Most people around you don't either. The majority of beds, if they exist at all, belong to the house, not the person. They are shared structures, claimed by whoever sleeps closest to them most consistently, or whoever the household agrees needs them most. A young maidservant might sleep curled under the kitchen bench, a teenage apprentice might stretch out in the loft, and an aging grandfather might be gently helped into the warmest corner of the house each night, surrounded by thick blankets and the smell of burnt rushes. But if you're poor, and most people are, you sleep on what's available. Sometimes that's a shared straw mattress. Sometimes it's just straw, period. Tossed into a pile, kicked flat by bare feet, and made tolerable by sheer exhaustion. And if you're really down on your luck, you bed down on packed earth by the fire, clutching your boots under your head to keep them from thieves. This is the bedless majority. You're not alone, but you are never quite comfortable either. There's no social expectation of having your own sleeping space. That would be considered luxurious, almost laughable. Children sleep with their parents. Servants sleep with each other. Guests sleep wherever they're told. And the idea of privacy, of drawing a curtain and stretching your limbs freely in peace, is something you see only in churches and noble houses, places where the silence and separation are forms of power. You, meanwhile, grow used to hearing other people sleep. Their breath becomes your lullaby, their shifting weight, their midnight murmurs, the crack of their joints, and even their dreams. These are your nighttime soundtrack. At first, it's difficult. You lie awake, trying not to touch anyone, flinching at every sigh. But slowly, your body learns to rest in public. Not public like the market, but public like family, like shared fatigue. You fall asleep not despite the others, but because of them. That doesn't mean you enjoy it. Some nights, you dread the bed, the smell, the moisture, the neighbor with sour breath and sweaty knees. But there is no choice. Beds are scarce, and so are the rooms to hold them. A house might have one main chamber, with no inner doors, just beams, pegs, and maybe a hanging cloth or two for modesty. If you're lucky, your house has a loft space where older children sleep. If not, everyone finds space around the fire, and bed arrangements shift like tides. One child wakes up cold and crawls toward the center. Another kicks off the blanket in a fever and is pulled closer by a sister. A mother sleeps with a baby on her chest, only to be joined by her 7-year-old, shivering after a nightmare. There is no schedule. The night is a living thing, and your position within it changes as it unfolds. And if you're an apprentice living in a master's home, you sleep where the master tells you. That might be the corner of the workshop, a shelf above the animals, or a shared pallet with 2 other boys who snore, scratch, and whisper about girls they've never met. In wealthier homes, apprentices and servants often sleep in stairwells or under tables, careful not to wake the household when rising before dawn. One fringe account from a 15th century butcher's apprentice describes sleeping beside a salted pig carcass in the cold storage room because the main bed was too crowded. It snored less, he wrote, but the dreams were worse. Historians still argue whether that line was serious or sarcastic. Even among the relatively comfortable, bed space is a resource, not a right. You might sleep in the same place for months, only to be displaced when a cousin arrives from another town or a new infant is born. And when you lose your spot, no one apologizes. They simply tell you where to go next. The threshold, the bench, the hayloft. You take your blanket, if you have one, and adapt. If you're lucky, someone shares their warmth. If not, you curl tighter. Your body becomes its own bed, wrapping in on itself like a scroll. No one coddles you. The expectation is that you're tired enough to sleep anywhere, and you usually are. It's easy to romanticize the closeness of medieval sleeping, to imagine a cozy tangle of loved ones beneath a woolen blanket, whispering stories as the wind howls outside. And yes, sometimes it was like that. Sometimes the night was gentle, the bodies beside you familiar and kind. A sister humming softly, a father's steady breath, a baby's tiny foot pressed into your thigh. But more often, it was a logistical nightmare. Someone wet the bed. Someone had lice. Someone had night terrors and screamed every few hours. Someone farted loudly and then pretended to still be asleep. You're stuck in that space, too tired to move, too cold to pull away. You bury your face in the blanket and wait for sleep to come. And it always does somehow. Sleep finds a way to settle into even the most uncomfortable places. Your body adjusts. You learn to ignore the itch of straw, the groan of beams above, the slurred prayers of the person beside you. It's not peace, exactly, but it's something close. The absence of fear, the shared agreement that for this night, and maybe this night only, we survive together. And if someone wakes crying, perhaps a child or an elder in pain, the others stir, groan, maybe reach out a hand. Not tender, not dramatic, just human. What's interesting is that even those who did own beds rarely slept in them alone. A merchant's wife might share with her maid. A noblewoman with her female companion or sister. Even the wealthiest people found reasons to double up. Fear of theft, desire for conversation, the belief that two bodies made for better dreams. Some even believed that sleeping beside someone cured melancholy, that the shared breath of a friend could keep nightmares away. It wasn't about romance, it was about presence, a reminder that you weren't alone in the dark. The few who slept alone were often religious hermits or anchorites, people who chose solitude as a spiritual path, and even they struggled. Monastic writings are filled with confessions about sleeplessness, anxiety, visions in the night. The human mind, left alone too long, begins to wander. Dreams get louder, shadows stretch, sleep becomes a battleground. And so, the communal bed endured not because it was ideal, but because it worked. It was noisy, itchy, crowded, uncomfortable, and safer than silence. As you drift into sleep in your crowded corner, the house breathes with you. A dozen other lungs rise and fall, tangled in the same rhythm. The fire has gone out. The world is dark, but you are not alone. You are a piece in a living mosaic of survival, all limbs and warmth and half-spoken dreams. And if you wake with someone's knee in your ribs, you simply nudge them gently and shift. No anger, no blame, just the quiet understanding of another night survived together. You wake up to the smell of ale-soaked wood and the unmistakable stink of feet that haven't met soap in a fortnight. Welcome to the medieval inn. It's not the romantic kind from the stories, with feather beds and candlelight. No, this one's more practical, built for shelter, not serenity. The floor creaks with every step, the shutters rattle even when there's no wind, and the air is thick with a mix of smoke, spilled beer, damp wool, and last night's gossip. You'd hope for sleep, but instead, you got a symphony of snores, coughs, and slurred ramblings echoing through the rafters. This isn't a bad inn. In fact, for the price, it's probably one of the better ones in the region. It even has straw that was changed this season. But as you rub the sleep from your eyes and try to find your boots in the half-light, you remember you weren't the only one in that bed. In fact, you weren't even the third. Beds in medieval inns were rarely private. The concept of booking a room for one was either absurd or obscene, depending on who you asked. You didn't rent the whole bed, you rented a slice of it, often without knowing who'd already claimed the other slices. The innkeeper pointed you upstairs, maybe gave a nod toward the corner mattress, and that was that. You lifted the blanket, found a spot between two other warm bodies, and tried to sleep without touching anyone too much. Of course, that was nearly impossible. Elbows find ribs, knees knock knees. Someone's breath curls into your neck, and someone else's hair is in your mouth. It's an unspoken dance of shared discomfort, and still, it beats sleeping outside, where the dogs roam and the air bites through your cloak. The tavern below you doesn't quiet when the beds fill. It keeps buzzing, long into the night, with laughter, dice clattering, and the occasional shout as someone loses a coin or throws a punch. Every wooden beam acts like a drum, carrying every noise upward into the sleeping quarters. Even if you manage to drift off, your dreams will be shaped by the soundscape of humanity, continuing just below an earthy, rhythmic reminder that life doesn't stop just because you close your eyes. Historians still argue whether this constant buzz of life wore people down or reassured them. Some say the noise meant you weren't alone. Others say it drove travelers mad, especially those unaccustomed to the unfiltered intimacy of medieval group sleep. Then there's the matter of who your bedmates are. They're not your family. They're not your friends. Most times, you don't even catch their names. You just know one is a baker's apprentice from the next town over, judging by the flour under his nails. Another might be a traveling friar, whispering prayers in Latin before drifting into loud, holy snores. One man, half buried under the blanket, hasn't moved in hours. Is he asleep or dead? Hard to say. You poke him gently with your toe. He grunts. Still alive? That's enough. Everyone keeps to themselves, or pretends to. If someone rolls too far, the others shift to accommodate. It's a fragile, unspoken alliance. You need each other to keep warm. You need each other to keep safe. But that doesn't mean you like each other. And while the inn might offer a fireplace and something resembling a meal, the bed rarely comes with the linens. You bring your own if you're smart. A wool cloak, a scrap of linen, maybe a small pillow tied to your pack. The mattress itself is a communal horror stained, flattened, and emitting a smell that has no clear origin. You lie down anyway. You press your shoulder to the wall, your feet against someone else's shins, and you try to claim enough space to sleep without offending the others. There's an art to it. Too much movement and you're seen as rude. Too little, and someone else steals your corner. And if you snore, well, good luck. Some inns kept a cane by the door just for poking the loud ones. Of course, there's more than just noise and limbs to contend with. You hear things, not just footsteps or laughter, but whispered plans. People talk in their sleep, or they talk to the person beside them, assuming everyone else is asleep. Secrets get shared in these half-dark hours. A merchant reveals he's carrying silver hidden in his saddle. A soldier mutters about a debt he can't repay. A young woman weeps quietly, pressed against the bedpost, clutching her satchel. These moments come and go. You learn not to react. You lie still, pretending to sleep, letting their voices drift past you like wind through a broken shutter. And sometimes, things go missing. Not often, but often enough to make you wary. A coin purse, a belt knife, a woolen hood. You keep your belongings close, your hand on your satchel, your pack under your knees. Most travelers follow the same rule: never fully undress. Keep your boots close, sleep lightly. The ones who don't, they tend to wake cold, confused, and short a few coins. But it's rarely worth a confrontation. You might look around the room, eyes scanning familiar strangers, but you say nothing. It's easier that way. Everyone knows the rules, even if no one wrote them down. The irony is, for all its discomfort, the inn-bed is still a social place. Deals are struck here, friendships are made, stories are swapped as the firelight fades. Some even fall in love, or at least into something that feels close enough for one night. The close proximity breeds familiarity, even if it's fleeting. You might spend just one night beside someone and remember them years later, how they snored like a rusted bellows, or how they mumbled a childhood song in their sleep. These are the strange, intimate memories that traveling creates. In the morning, it's a blur of movement. Someone always rises first, stirring the rest. There's coughing, groaning, the smell of morning breath and sweat and ale. People step over each other, packing quickly, shaking out cloaks and wiping their faces with the corner of a tunic. No one lingers. No one says goodbye. You gather your things and head downstairs, where the innkeeper might have a bowl of porridge and a mug of bitter beer. Then it's out the door and back to the road. The bed you shared is forgotten by nightfall, its warmth already claimed by a new set of tired travelers. And yet, the experience sticks with you, not for its comfort, but for its raw honesty. Sharing a bed in an inn strips away everything except the most basic truths: you are a body among bodies, surviving together for a night. No pretenses, no privacy, just the soft, persistent hum of human life unfolding around you. The shuffle of feet, the rustle of blankets, the soft exhale of sleep beside you, reminding you that even in discomfort, there's a kind of connection we no longer recognize. You didn't choose them, and they didn't choose you, but for one night, you were part of the same tired, dreaming world. You try to turn over, but there's no room. One arm is trapped beneath someone else's back. Your knees are wedged against a wall, or is that a trunk? And your face is too close to a stranger's shoulder. You're not sure whose. Everyone is asleep, or pretending to be. The air is thick, warmer than it should be for winter, but not in a good way. It's the kind of heat that comes from breath and bodies, a damp, clinging warmth that makes it hard to breathe deeply. You want to shift, to stretch, to take a full breath and move your spine. But the second you do, someone beside you grunts and tightens their position, dragging the shared blanket tighter. So, you lie there, immobile, wondering whether this is what they meant by the phrase packed in like salted fish. It's not poetic. It's not tragic. It's just how it is. You've slept like this for years now, elbow to elbow, chest to shoulder, sharing a thin quilt and a pile of old hay with whoever ended up beside you. And while you know it's for warmth, part of you still wonders how no one has suffocated in the middle of the night. Because here's the thing, Spooning isn't romantic when it's mandatory, when the night air dips below freezing, and your only chance of survival is pressing your back against the nearest source of heat. Intimacy becomes irrelevant. The idea of personal space dissolves. You sleep in layers not of fabric, but of people. Your body is a puzzle piece, fitted against others for the maximum insulation. There's a sort of choreography to it. The largest bodies sleep on the outside, the smallest in the middle. You curl inward, wrap your arms around your own knees or someone else's, and you don't move unless everyone moves. One person rolling over means the entire group has to rotate like a creaky old clock. And it happens often. A twitch, a cough, someone kicking in their sleep, and the entire bed shifts in a domino of complaints, sighs, and sleepy adjustments. It's a group project in unconscious cooperation. Of course, this proximity comes with consequences. Someone's breath in your ear, someone's hand accidentally landing where it shouldn't, not on purpose. Usually it's just how bodies fall, but the tension that follows is always the same. You stiffen, unsure if it was intentional. They freeze too, probably equally unsure. You both pretend it didn't happen. And in the morning, you don't speak of it. What's the alternative? Accuse someone of touching you in their sleep. When all of you are tangled together like roots in a forest floor, the bed doesn't allow for clear lines. You give up the illusion of boundaries the moment you lie down. This doesn't mean everything is sinister. More often than not, it's just awkward. A teenage boy elbowing his brother's wife by mistake. A young girl waking with a stranger's foot under her blanket. Nobody planned it. Nobody wanted it. But in a bed built for warmth and not modesty, these things happen. And modesty, by the way, isn't what you think it is. You don't have pajamas. Maybe you have a shift or a tunic you sleep in, but more often than not, people undress at least partially before bed. Not out of comfort, but necessity. Clothes are valuable. You don't want them to be soaked in night sweat. You fold your outer garments and place them carefully near your head, where you can keep an eye on them. And what's left? A thin linen layer, if that. You're shoulder to shoulder with others, covered by a blanket that smells like wet wool and old onions, praying that no one gets up to relieve themselves in the middle of the night, because if they do, you're going to hear it, smell it, and probably feel them climbing back over you. Still, there's a strange camaraderie in it. You wake up with a crick in your neck and someone else's hair in your mouth, and someone mutters a joke through dry lips, and everyone groans together. It's awful, but it's our awful. There's something deeply human about hating the same discomfort at the same time as others. It breeds quiet loyalty. You trust the people you sleep beside, not because they're good, but because they're real. You've seen them snore, twitch, sweat, drool. You've smelled their worst, and they've smelled yours. There's no illusion left. In that bed, you're all just animals surviving the cold night. You might joke about it later. Gerard's feet were colder than death. Or Agnes talks to ghosts in her sleep, but in the moment, it's just normal. And this isn't a special night. This is every night. If you're a servant in a household, you sleep in shifts, often doubling up with another maid or cook, depending on who finishes their chores last. If you're a farmhand, you sleep in the barn loft, near the hay and under the eaves, pressed between two other lads who snore like thunder. If you're a tenant in a town, you might be lucky to afford a cot in a room with 6 others, each one coughing into the rafters and muttering in their sleep. The city hums around you even at night, drunks in the alley, dogs barking, bells tolling the hour, but the worst sound is always the silence of someone waking up to leave the bed. Because if they leave, you lose their warmth, and now the blanket isn't enough. Now you're awake, teeth chattering, listening to them fumble with a chamber pot or unlatch the door. It's all logistics. How many bodies can fit? Who sleeps where? Who gets the edge and risks a draft? And who gets the middle and risks suffocation? It's not about fairness, it's about routine. There are unspoken rules. Don't steal the blanket. Don't elbow the pregnant woman. Don't talk after the candles are blown out. Keep your knees to yourself. Don't eat garlic before bed if you're going to breathe on anyone. And if you break the rules, you'll know it. Someone will jab you, mutter under their breath, or flat out move to another bed, leaving you to explain why. The social mechanics of shared sleep are delicate, built on necessity and grudging cooperation. And yet, despite the discomfort, you sometimes miss it when it's gone. On the rare occasion you sleep alone, perhaps assigned to a storage room or a corner of a barn, you lie awake longer. The silence is strange. The cold is sharper. There's no rhythm of breath to match. No bodies shifting beside you. You become aware of the sounds outside the creak of the beams, the wind clawing at the shutters, the scratching of rats in the thatch. You suddenly feel very small. The bed, for all its cramped misery, was at least human. Alone. The night stretches wider. Your thoughts get louder. Your fear has room to stretch. So you learn to appreciate the cluster. You learn to share the heat, the noise, the mutual awkwardness. You find small comforts in it. A shared joke, a warm shoulder, the knowledge that when you wake coughing, someone else is already awake, grumbling and reaching for the water pot. You don't love it, but you'd rather have it than the alternative, because sleep, in the medieval world, isn't about rest. It's about surviving until morning, and surviving is always easier with someone snoring beside you. You scratch your arm without thinking, but the itch returns almost instantly. It's not just the straw, though that's part of it. The broken shafts jab at your skin like tiny spears. No, it's something else. Something smaller, something moving. Lice. You feel them crawling, or imagine you do, which might be worse. They live in the seams of your shift, in the folds of the blanket, in the very air between you and the next sleeper. If you're lucky, it's just lice. Fleas are worse, and bed bugs. You don't even like to think about those. You share your bed with people. Yes, but also with all the things those people bring with them. Their warmth, their snores, their whispers, and their parasites. You wake with little red bites around your ankles. You scratch until they scab. You curse quietly, because what else can you do? Boiling the linens helps. But how often does that happen? Once a season? Maybe? And even if the cloth is clean, what about the stuffing, the hay, the feathers, the wool? Filthy, flattened, and alive in ways it shouldn't be. You itch, you scratch, and then you stop scratching because it only makes it worse. But not everything in the bed is uninvited. Sometimes the closeness turns into something else. Something warmer than heat, thicker than breath. You feel it when a hand lingers a little too long, when a leg brushes yours and doesn't move. You feel it even when it doesn't happen to you, when it happens beside you, between two others. You lie there in the dark, eyes wide open, listening. A whisper, a stifled laugh, a gasp. You turn your head slightly, trying not to rustle the blanket. You see the outline of two people moving closer. You look away, or maybe you don't. This is the world of the shared bed, where intimacy has no walls and privacy is a fiction. What's public becomes private by silence. No one speaks of it in the morning. It happened, or it didn't. And either way, it stays under the blanket. This isn't rare, it's common, especially among the young. Courting happens in daylight, but desire waits until nightfall. There's no your room or my room. No locked doors, no separate houses. If you're close in the day, you're closer at night. Even if you aren't, chance has a way of throwing people together. A wedding celebration, a harvest festival, a night at an inn when every mattress is taken. People drink, people press together, things happen, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the closeness is just that closeness, a shared space, a warm body beside you when you're too tired to think of anything else. But the possibility is always there, humming like a second heartbeat beneath the snoring and the scratching. And yet, there are risks. Not just scandal, though, that comes quickly if the wrong eyes see the wrong shape beneath the blanket, but consequences, a pregnancy, a disease, a broken trust. These things matter. Even here, even now. The church frowns on fornication, especially under a roof meant to be respectable. A girl found in the wrong bed may find herself shunned. A boy may find himself married or worse, run out of town. Historians still argue whether these shared beds encouraged more of such unions or simply made them harder to hide. But either way, they happened. Not constantly, but not rarely either. And the bed remembers, even if no one else does. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. You try to ignore the faint rustle beside you. The breathing that's changed, gone slower, deeper. You focus on your own body, on the curve of your spine and the ache in your legs. You count your breaths. 1, 2, 3. You pretend you don't hear the whisper. Pretend you're asleep. Because that's the rule, really. You only break the silence of the bed if you must. If there's fire, or blood, or death. Anything else, you keep your mouth shut and your eyes closed. That's how everyone gets along. That's how the peace holds. But not everyone in the bed is part of a secret. Most are just trying to sleep, just trying to stay warm. They have no interest in intimacy, and even if they did, they're too tired. You hear a deep sigh. Someone turns, pulling the blanket halfway off you. You tug it back gently. They grunt but don't protest. A moment later, another itch. You scratch again, slower this time. You wonder what's in the hay this season, mites. Maybe, or just too much dust. You'll shake it out tomorrow, maybe or not. Depends how tired you are. Depends whether it's raining. And in all of this, you find yourself strangely numb to the discomfort. You don't expect cleanliness. You don't expect solitude. You don't even expect comfort. What you expect is company. Not always wanted, but always there. The medieval bed isn't designed for pleasure. It's designed for efficiency, for survival, for making sure no one freezes alone. You fall asleep tangled with limbs and breath and cloth, and you wake up with your hair stuck to someone else's sleeve. You don't apologize. You don't smile. You just stretch, grunt, and sit up slowly, scratching where it itches and blinking away the stale air. In wealthier houses, the story isn't much different. Yes, the sheets are finer. Yes, the beds are larger, draped with heavy curtains and stitched with gold thread. But even here, you're not alone. The lady of the house may have a maid curled at her feet. The lord may share his bed with a squire, a favored cousin, a personal servant. The warmth principle still applies. So does the political one. Sleeping beside someone is a form of favor. It grants trust and receives it. You don't invite just anyone into your bed. But once they're in, they see everything. They hear everything. And they remember. Even kings aren't spared. Their beds are ceremonial. Vast enough to fit 3 or 4 comfortably, but they're still filled nightly sometimes with lovers. Yes, but often with advisors or guards. The idea of a king sleeping alone is too dangerous. What if he's attacked? What if he chokes in his sleep? Someone must be there. Witnesses, warmth, watchers. The royal bed is a political stage as much as a private refuge. A place where decisions are made beneath blankets, where alliances are whispered before dawn, and where rumors are born. It's no wonder that people grew used to being watched, not just in waking life, but in sleep. You don't control what you say when dreaming. You don't control how you breathe, or whether you grind your teeth, or mutter your father's name in fear. Someone hears it. Someone always hears. And that knowledge changes you. It makes you quieter, more cautious. You learn to shape even your sleep into something polite, something forgettable, something that doesn't draw attention. And yet, somehow, there's a kind of beauty in it too, in this shared surrender, in the messy, snoring chorus of bodies surviving night after night. Without fanfare, you dream beside each other. You sweat through summer and shiver through winter. You whisper, you laugh, you itch, you exist, together, not because you want to, but because you must. You might think royalty had easy silk sheets, perfumed chambers, soft pillows stitched by expert hands, but step closer, past the velvet curtains and gilt-painted walls, and you'll find something surprisingly familiar bodies. Not just one, not just 2, often 3 or more, snuggled into a space barely big enough to stretch without brushing another's arm. Yes, even kings and queens rarely slept alone. You may picture a monarch reclining in a bed big enough to sail in, draped in solitude. But the truth The royal bed was never really private. There were pages sleeping at the foot, servants stationed nearby, and, more often than not, companions who earned their place not just through affection, but through politics. Every body in that bed meant something: a strategic alliance, a trusted informant, a silent guardian. Sleep, for the powerful, was not a break from politics. It was an extension of it, and while the mattress might have been stuffed with the softest goose down, it still creaked beneath the weight of breath and betrayal. Even at court, sleep was layered with ritual. The going to bed ceremony itself could last over an hour. Nobles would witness the monarch being undressed, washed, and tucked in an odd mix of theater and obedience. And once the doors were shut, the night was far from over. A favored courtier might be invited to sleep at the king's side, under royal pretext or private affection. In some eras, this was standard. Charles VI of France slept beside his brother to stave off night terrors. Louis XIV invited noblemen to sleep at his feet, an honor that doubled as surveillance. The English court had a similar setup, where grooms of the bedchamber not only dressed the monarch, but shared his sleeping quarters, listening for anything from illness to whispers of conspiracy. Historians still argue whether this arrangement was more about intimacy or control, but the result was the same. The royal bed was crowded. Now, if you were a noblewoman, perhaps a lady-in-waiting or a queen, the experience was no more solitary. You, too, had your own ritual. Your chambermaids helped you into your nightclothes, brushed your hair, lit candles at the foot of the bed. Then they waited. Sometimes one stayed behind, not out of affection, but out of duty. The lady's chamber, like the lord's, was never truly hers. There was always someone nearby ready to run for medicine, to fetch water, to hear her dreams, to witness her confessions. You didn't sleep alone. You couldn't. It wasn't done. A woman alone in her bed was either gravely ill, deeply shamed, or suspicious. If she died in the night, no one would know. So someone stayed, quietly, not touching, but breathing in the same air, pretending not to listen when you whispered into the darkness. And then there were the children. Noble households overflowed with them, legitimate, illegitimate, fostered. Some slept in cribs. Many didn't. They climbed into their mother's bed, or their nurses, or shared a mattress with their siblings and half-siblings. The result was a palimpsest of bodies layered, sprawled, curled. A young duke might grow up pressed between a nursemaid and a forgotten cousin, learning early how to sleep without kicking too hard. He might hear secrets muttered into pillows. He might wake with a cold toe against his back and dream of solitude without ever having tasted it. Even the architecture gave into this reality. Royal chambers were vast, but not designed for solitude. Tapestries hung thick to trap warmth. The bed stood in the center like a throne, surrounded by stools, foot warmers, and sleeping pallets. The room wasn't silent. Servants moved at all hours. Fires needed tending, cloaks were fetched, messages delivered, a candle sputtered in the corner, a dog barked in the courtyard, a baby cried from another bed, 2 chambers away. And still, somehow, the monarch slept or tried to. Sleep was a thing you negotiated with the night, not something you claimed as your right. Occasionally, scandal would ripple through the palace when someone crossed a boundary. A servant caught lingering too long under the wrong blanket. A lady's maid dismissed after rumors of whispering too close to a baron's ear. These were not unusual, but neither were they taken lightly. Royal beds were sacred and volatile. To share one meant something, and if you did it without permission, the consequences could be swift banishment, disgrace, or worse. Which is why many noble households kept careful records of who slept where, and with whom. Written or unwritten, it was all remembered. But it wasn't all drama. There were quieter nights. A monarch sick with fever, sweating through sheets, tended to by his physician on one side, and his most trusted aide on the other. A queen mourning the death of a child, cradled not by her husband who slept elsewhere but by a sister or childhood friend. These beds bore more than crowns. They held sorrow, illness, joy. They held the weight of inheritance, of legacy, of flesh, and all of it unfolded in silence, in breath, in sleep shared but never spoken of. There's a fringe account from a Venetian ambassador who visited the French court in the late 1400s. He described seeing no less than 4 men reclining beside His Majesty before the second hour past midnight, each with a specific purpose, one for warmth, one for prayer, one for news, and one who was never named. The implication that even kings crave closeness, not just in daylight, but in the dark. Even power wants a heartbeat beside it. And let's not forget the practical side. These rooms were cold, stone walls, high ceilings, drafty windows. Even with a roaring fire, the heat drifted upward. You needed people beside you, not for love, not for politics, just for heat. A human body burns calories as warmth, 2 or 3. That's insulation. Royalty didn't defy biology. They felt the cold, too. And so they slept like everyone else, tangled, half-dressed, pressed between duty and necessity. You imagine them now, these kings and queens. One stirs in his sleep, mutters a name from childhood. Another kicks off a blanket and is gently covered again by a page who's pretending not to care. A queen turns, dreaming of a day when she was not yet a queen. Someone snores. Someone prays. Someone lies awake, listening to it all, knowing that come morning, none of it will be discussed. The curtains sway slightly. The coals in the hearth crackle. Somewhere down the corridor, a bell chimes softly to mark the hour. But here, in the great bed of state, there are only bodies, breathing, shifting, dreaming. This is the royal bed, not a place of peace, but of presence, not a haven, but a stage. And every sleeper, willing or not, plays their part in its quiet drama. Power, it turns out, doesn't sleep alone. You roll over, not onto a familiar sibling or your mother's bundled feet, but onto the coarse tunic of a man whose name you didn't catch. He's already fast asleep, back turned, arms crossed like he's trying to shrink into himself. You've only just met, or rather, you didn't meet at all. You were both told by the host at this way house that there's one spot left in the corner of the loft, and that's where you both went. He claimed the inside wall, probably because it's less drafty. You took what's left. Neither of you speaks. You're too tired to make introductions. And besides, what would you say? Good evening. And sorry if I elbow you in the ribs tonight. That kind of courtesy doesn't last long on the road. You're pilgrims, maybe, or journeymen, or simply 2 people moving from one patch of soil to another, bound by trade, faith, or desperation. Tonight, the only thing you share is a blanket and a need for sleep. And in the world outside the comfort of home and kin, that's already a lot. Traveling in the medieval world is rarely glamorous. It's muddy, exhausting, and full of unexpected detours. Roads are uneven, weather is merciless, and shelter is never guaranteed. You arrive late, wet, and aching in every joint. And unless you're wealthy enough to afford private lodgings, which you're not, you share what's available with whoever got there before or after you. That's how you end up lying hip to hip with a man who smells faintly of fish and old wine, whispering a prayer to yourself that he doesn't talk in his sleep, or worse, snore. You pull your cloak around you and feel the wooden floor pressing against your hip bone through the thin straw mattress. The host gave you a jug of warm beer and a bowl of something that might have been lentils. You're full enough not to complain. The blanket you're under rough wool, shared between the 2 of you. If he pulls too much to his side, you'll wake up shivering. So you stay still, quiet, waiting for sleep to find you before discomfort does. These shared pilgrim beds are everywhere. In roadside chapels, in merchant barns, in civic inns funded by guilds or local lords. They're not meant for comfort. They're meant to prevent death by exposure, a dry roof, a wall against the wind, and a warm body nearby. That's the recipe. And the pairing isn't always same sex. Sometimes, due to crowding or poor timing, you end up sharing a bed with a woman you don't know, and no one blinks. It's not assumed to be scandalous, it's assumed to be necessary. That doesn't mean people are blind to the dangers, which is why in many of these hostels, a warden, monk, or innkeeper sleeps near the fire or the stairs, not to offer service, but to ensure peace. They don't intervene unless there's noise or trouble, but their presence is felt. A watchful eye, a human boundary. Of course, not every sleeping partner is benign. You've heard stories. Everyone has. The thief who waited until his bedfellow drifted off and then quietly untied his purse. The woman who woke to find her ring gone and a stranger missing. The merchant who carried gold sewn into the hem of his undertunic until someone with nimble fingers and no conscience removed it overnight. These tales circulate around campfires, whispered from bedrolls, half-warned over mugs of ale. Whether they're true or not doesn't matter. They change how you sleep. You turn toward the wall. You wedge your pouch beneath your neck. You keep your boots on, just in case. And yet, for every tale of theft, there's another of unlikely kindness. A man who gave up the warmer spot near the hearth for an older traveler, a stranger who shared dried fruit when the supper ran thin, a woman who wrapped her half of the blanket around a coughing child she'd never met. These things happen, too, because there's a quiet understanding among travelers tonight it's me. Tomorrow it might be you. You never know who you'll sleep beside, but you know what it means. The bed is an offering, not of love, not of conversation, but of tolerance, of shared vulnerability. That's what makes it so strange. You lie there, next to a man you wouldn't recognize in daylight, trusting him not to harm you, to stay on his side of the bed, to keep his hands to himself and his breath aimed elsewhere. You trust him because you have to, because there's no other way. There are no locks on the door, no partitions between sleepers, just proximity and hope, and the sheer fatigue that turns strangers into temporary kin. And this isn't just a custom, it's a system. In pilgrimage routes across Europe, from Canterbury to Santiago, sleeping with strangers is part of the rhythm. The hostels, or hospices, were built for it. Rows of low beds, side by side, one blanket per two people. The pillow, if there is one, is shared. You sleep with your boots near your chest, your satchel under your knees. You keep your hat on to ward off lice and prying eyes, and you face the same way as everyone else, because that's what keeps things peaceful. One long line of curved backs, breathing in and out, barely speaking. It feels almost monastic, like a chorus of exhausted monks, except half of them are snoring and one has definitely eaten too much onion. But not all journeys are spiritual. Sometimes you travel for trade, for work, for messages. You end up at roadside inns that don't even pretend to be clean. You find yourself in a stable loft, lying beside three men and a sheep who seems unbothered by the whole situation. You close your eyes and try not to think about what's crawling in the hay. The man beside you coughs. You turn your face the other way. Someone else farts. No one says a word. This is life on the road. Not a storybook, not a painting, but a long string of nights like this one, damp, loud, communal, and somehow still comforting. Even in cities, it's the same. If you can't afford a proper bed, you pay for a space in a flop house or sleep on the floor of a tavern. You lie beside beggars, laborers, apprentices, people who speak languages you don't know, people who dream aloud, people who snore so violently you think the rafters might fall. But still, you stay, because even surrounded by strangers, the shared body heat, the low murmur of voices, the press of limbs and breath, it all lulls you into something resembling rest. Not because it's safe, but because it's familiar. In the morning, you part ways. No goodbyes, no names, maybe a nod. If the night passed without trouble, you gather your things, you stretch, you rub your neck, and find the imprint of someone else's elbow still pressed into your shoulder. You don't mind. You're too used to it. You take your place in the long line of the waking, shaking out your cloak, retying your belt, and heading toward whatever task awaits. The person who shared your bed disappears into the day, like a dream half remembered. You'll probably never see them again, but for one night, you were closer to them than to some of your own kin. You shared sleep, and in this world, that's something deeper than words. You stir before dawn, long before the first crack of sunlight touches the cold stone walls. Around you, the others are still breathing in slow, uneven rhythms, some murmuring fragments of dreams, others silent as tombs. But in the monastery, sleep never lasts too long. A bell will ring soon, and the room will move like a tide. This isn't your home, or your inn, or a way house on the road. You're in a dormitory, rows of low wooden beds, or pallets spaced evenly beneath a vaulted ceiling that holds more prayer than air. You've never been somewhere so quiet, and yet so filled with presence. This is where monks sleep, not alone, not in luxury, but together, as they do everything in rhythm, in devotion, and in silence. You lie still, listening. Even the creak of your breath feels intrusive here. Monastic dormitories are some of the most deliberately communal sleeping spaces in the medieval world. The beds are often arranged in long rows, sometimes divided by light wooden partitions, but often just inches apart. Each monk has a mattress, maybe a blanket, and a wooden pillow or bolster. No more, no less. They don't sleep in clothes. They sleep in habits long, coarse robes tied loosely around the waist. Warmth comes not from layering, but from habit. Literally. You pull the hood over your face and turn toward the wall. There is no fire in the room. Fire is dangerous. Fire is forbidden. You sleep cold, but not alone. Even in the stillness, there is order. Every monk has a place, decided by rank or years in the order. The elder monks take the ends closer to the door, closer to duty. The novices are clustered in the center, watched from both sides. You're just visiting, maybe. Or maybe you're new, just learning the rules. You don't speak, you barely breathe, you wait. And when the bell rings soft, but firm, you rise without a word, joining the procession of sleepy bodies filing into the darkness, robes swishing, candles flickering, voices unbroken by speech. This is the night office, a midnight service performed by monks across Europe, often between midnight and 3 a.m. The idea is simple. If God never sleeps, neither should his faithful. So, the monks rise, pray, chant psalms, and return to bed before the rest of the world even stirs. It's a rhythm that seems strange to outsiders, but to the monks, it's life. It breaks the night into two pieces before prayer and after. The sleep they return to is not deep. It's functional, necessary, just enough to sustain the body until the next bell. The next psalm, the next quiet task that keeps the world stitched together. And though the room is filled with men, it never feels crowded. There's a discipline here. No turning, no snoring. If someone makes a sound, it's a cough, muffled quickly in a sleeve. No one speaks after compline the final prayer before bed. From then until dawn, the world is held in sacred quiet. Even dreaming feels too loud. You learn to sleep small, to sleep respectfully, to sleep as if someone is always watching, not with suspicion, but with reverence. And someone is always watching. The hebdomadarian, or weekly appointed elder monk, sleeps nearest the door. His job is to rouse those who do not rise, to ensure discipline, to protect the sanctity of the dormitory. He doesn't speak unless he must. He watches. You feel his presence as a calm weight in the room, reassuring, but unmoving. A reminder that even in sleep, your soul is not alone. Of course, not all monasteries followed the same rules. Some, particularly the more ascetic orders, believed that sleep was a temptation, a distraction from God. They would limit themselves to just a few hours a night, broken into fragments by bells and rituals. Their beds were barely more than boards. Their blankets, if they had them, were thin and worn. Others, more practical in their theology, allowed warmth and comfort in moderation, believing that a rested body served better than a shivering one. Historians still debate which was more common, but the reality likely depended on geography, funding, and the abbot's temperament. There's a curious story from a Cistercian monastery in the 13th century, where a young monk supposedly sleep-talked entire verses from the Psalms, word for word. His brothers believed it a sign of divine favor. The abbot, less amused, moved him to the end of the dormitory to avoid disruption. Whether true or not, it captures the essence of monastic sleep: quiet, yes, but never entirely human. You don't sleep here the way you do in an inn, or a farmhouse, or even a pilgrim's hut. You sleep with purpose. You sleep with discipline. You sleep in the shadow of eternity. And if you share the bed, that happens too. Sometimes, when novices arrive and space is limited, they sleep two to a mattress, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in tandem, learning to fall asleep beside someone who shares your faith, your hunger, your fatigue. It's not forbidden. It's not encouraged either. It just is. Another form of submission to the rhythm of the order. Another sacrifice of self for the collective. There is no shame in it. The monks don't gossip. They don't whisper. Their days are full of work, copying manuscripts, tending gardens, mending robes, baking bread. By nightfall, they are so tired that sleep is more release than indulgence. They don't long for privacy. They long for peace. And they find it, sometimes, in the slow rise and fall of the bodies beside them, in the shared surrender to stillness, in the knowledge that for these few hours, the world outside can wait. The dormitory itself reflects this attitude. No decorations, no tapestries, just whitewashed walls, wooden beams, and narrow windows high above to let in the moonlight. It smells of candle wax, sweat, old wool, and oddly, something like paper, perhaps from the scriptorium nearby. The floor is swept daily. The sheets, when they exist, are aired weekly. Cleanliness is not luxury here. It is devotion. A tidy bed honors God. An orderly room reflects an orderly soul. You lie back down after the night office, your limbs heavy with ritual. The mattress feels no softer than before, but your body doesn't care. You close your eyes. You don't dream of lovers, or riches, or far-off cities. You dream of light, of bells, of pages turning, of silent brothers sleeping beside you, breathing together like wind through pine trees. You are alone. You are not alone. The morning bell will come soon. You'll rise again, fold your blanket, and leave the dormitory without a word. Another day will begin, structured and quiet and full of motion without noise. But for now, you rest in the center of something older than time. You rest in a place where sleep is not escape, but obedience. Not indulgence, but devotion. And around you, others do the same. A community built not on conversation, but on breath, on ritual, on stillness, on sleep shared not by choice, but by calling. You stretch your legs just a little and immediately regret it. Your foot hits the edge of something hard. Not a wall, a bench, or a storage chest. You're not even on a mattress tonight. You're lying on a narrow wooden board, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, surrounded by the sounds of others doing the same. There are half a dozen of you lined up like sacks in a merchant's cart, each person curled around their own discomfort, pretending the hard surface beneath them is softer than it is. This is what passes for a bed in many homes, especially if you're poor or a servant or just not important enough to merit your own sleeping space. And when it comes to benches, you don't get to be picky. You sleep where there's room, alongside the wall, across a chest, curled on a table that was cleared too late to be useful for anything else. The luxury of lying flat on a real bed is not something you expect. You adjust your hips slightly, trying to keep your blanket from slipping, and you remember that in this house, like most houses, the bed is a piece of furniture, not a guarantee. In fact, it's not unusual for a medieval household to have just one official bed. If that, and even then, it belongs to the master and mistress of the home. The rest of you make do. The word bed in this time means something flexible. It might mean a frame and mattress, or a pile of straw in the corner, or this, an old bench with a sagging board and a blanket that's seen too many winters. And if you're a guest, you don't ask for more. You accept what's offered, you nod your thanks, and you lie down quietly, fitting yourself into whatever sliver of space remains. In some homes, there's an actual term for this makeshift sleeping bed by the bench. It means you're not yet trusted, or not yet family, or simply unlucky. But even so, you're inside. You're not out with the dogs. You've been given a place, even if it creaks when you breathe, and creak it does. The wood beneath you is old, maybe repurposed from something else. It groans with every slight motion, a complaint that's loud enough to be noticed, but not loud enough to matter. The person beside you is sleeping upright against the wall, Knees pulled in tight, arms folded under their chin. Someone else has somehow managed to lie fully horizontal across 3 stools pushed together, and you wonder how long they'll last before one tips. There's a child sleeping on the hearth's edge, tucked behind the fire grate, and another curled in a basket lined with sheep's wool. The room is quiet, but not silent breath, rustles, and the occasional pop of the dying coals. You stare at the ceiling, counting the beams. No one complains. Not really. This is normal. When space is tight, and it usually is, people sleep in shifts, layers, and improvisations. The concept of your bed is meaningless when your home consists of a single room. You eat, sleep, work, and argue in the same space. The same smells linger from supper to sleep. The same chairs hold backsides by day and serve as mattresses by night. Sometimes you don't even get the bench, you get the floor. And if you do, you're grateful for a spot near the fire, away from the drafty door. You spread a blanket or, more often, a cloak. You curl into yourself. You become part of the furniture. This blending of furniture and flesh leads to some strange habits. You start sleeping in your clothes more often, or, if you're protective of them, you undress just enough to avoid creases and fold your tunic beneath your head. You learn to sleep with a belt pouch under your arm, your boots tied together and tucked behind your knees so they don't walk off during the night. If you're a woman, you might bind your hair or sleep with your back to the room. If you're a man, you might sleep with one eye half open, especially if you're somewhere new. Trust is a luxury, like sheets. You can't always afford it, and yet, people make it work. You grow used to the smell of smoke in your blanket, to the feel of wood against your spine, to the sound of someone coughing 3 feet away and not bothering to cover their mouth. One man's sneeze becomes a shared event. Someone mutters in his sleep, someone else kicks, someone gets up to relieve themselves in the night, stepping carefully between limbs and shoes and scattered belongings. No one scolds them, no one minds. This is simply how nights unfold. Unremarkable, unkind, and completely human. What's more, the hard surfaces become part of your rhythm. The first few nights on a bench or a plank are miserable. You ache. You can't find a position. Your hip bones press painfully into the surface, but the body is adaptable. Within a week, you sleep through the creaks. Within a month, you find yourself oddly comforted by the rigidity. A soft bed begins to seem suspicious, too yielding, too unfamiliar. Some older folks even prefer the hard benches, claiming they ease the joints and keep the blood moving. There's an old saying, rarely written but often spoken: a hard bed makes an honest man. You're not sure what that means, but tonight, you understand it more than usual. And while you might think this style of sleep was only for the poor, think again. Even in grand houses, servants slept wherever there was room, behind curtains, in wardrobes, on trunks, in hallways, if it was warm enough. A grand bed for the master didn't mean privacy for the rest. If anything, the richer the household, the more crowded the servant quarters. And those quarters, they were often just glorified storage spaces. You might be a lady's maid by day, but by night, you're curled beside the scullery maid, toes touching, hands crossed over your stomach, both of you pretending to be asleep before the other starts talking, or crying, or just breathing too loud. There's a kind of forced intimacy in all this. You learn things about your housemates you never wanted to know. Who snores, who talks in their sleep, who twitches at odd hours. You share not just physical space, but unconscious space. Your dreams bleed into each other's murmurs. Your cough sets off a chain reaction. Your blanket shifts when someone at the far end turns over. You become part of a collective organism, a sleeping beast with a dozen limbs and a single shared pulse. One fringe account from a 14th century Flemish household describes a traveler who was given a place upon the bread bench. At first it sounds quaint, until you realize the bread bench was the kitchen shelf where rising dough was left to warm. The traveler was told not to move too much, or he'd crush tomorrow's loaves. He didn't. He slept sitting up, arms crossed, a rat watching him from the beams. In the morning, he left a few coins and a note scratched in charcoal. The bread dreams more sweetly than I. Historians debate whether it's a joke or a complaint. You roll to your side now, knees tucked, arms folded beneath your head, The wood is unforgiving, but the blanket's not bad, and the fire's glow is still strong. Around you, others shift and sigh. Someone snores. Someone mutters. Someone breathes in rhythm with your own tired lungs. And you find, somehow, that this is enough. The bench holds you, the night forgives you, and sleep, though it comes slowly, arrives not with softness, but with the simple comfort of knowing you're not sleeping alone. You lie still, eyes half open in the dark, listening to the sound of someone scratching just a few feet away. Not vigorously, just that quiet, rhythmic kind of scratching that makes you wonder if they're awake or doing it in their sleep. Then the bed creaks a long, slow moan of ancient wood under shifting weight, and you feel a draft sneak under the edge of the blanket. Someone else must have turned over and stolen part of it with them. You tug gently, reclaiming just enough to cover your shoulder and settle back into place. It's late, or early, you're not sure. You've long since given up trying to measure time in hours. The night is divided instead by the slow cycle of breathing bodies, the occasional burst of murmured dreams, and the strange symphony of noises that accompany every shared bed. You're not sure who invented the idea of sleepwear, but it definitely hasn't caught on here. Most of the others are either in thin undertunics or stripped down to nothing at all, their limbs tangled under the same woolen covering, their skin a map of goosebumps and contact points. The idea of modesty is suspended along with the expectation of silence, because medieval sleep, at least in shared beds, was rarely quiet. It was a whole performance of grunts, snores, gasps, and groans. People talk in their sleep, and not in poetic whispers. They mutter half sentences about lost chickens or stolen coins. Some argue with ghosts. Others pray soft, repetitive phrases, half remembered from evening mass, and flatulence. You gave up blushing about that long ago. The human body doesn't pause for politeness while it sleeps. It sighs, releases, wheezes. One man even whistles through his nose when he exhales, like a tiny tea kettle slowly boiling. If you let it bother you, you'll never sleep. So, you adapt. You build tolerance. You make peace with the soundtrack of humanity. It's not all involuntary sounds, either. Sometimes people whisper on purpose, especially late at night, when sleep won't come and the fire has turned to a soft orange glow. It's during those moments that someone might lean in and share a memory half out of boredom, half out of comfort. A woman speaks softly of her daughter, married and living 3 towns over. A boy confesses he's never seen the sea. An old man, face shadowed by his cloak, begins recounting a dream he's had 3 nights in a row about wolves that speak with his brother's voice. You listen, or pretend to, curled into yourself with your head turned just enough to catch the words. These aren't full conversations. They're offerings. Temporary, weightless. By morning, no one will mention them again. But in the hush of midnight, they feel enormous. Then there are the practical interruptions. Someone stands up, muttering about needing the chamber pot. They shuffle across the room, stepping over others, careful but never entirely silent. You hear the dull scrape of ceramic, the sound of the water, the soft grumble of a floorboard, then the shuffle back. Sometimes they lie down in the same spot. Sometimes they settle elsewhere. In homes without pots, they go outside to the corner of the yard, the alley, or behind the stable. And if they wake a dog, you'll all know it. 1 bark, then 2, then the whole street seems to stir. Dogs, chickens, even a braying donkey. You bury your face in the blanket and wait for the night to settle again. These moments are not strange. They're normal, expected. Shared sleep in the medieval world was never sterile. It was a constant negotiation between comfort and necessity, between your own body and those around you. There was no privacy. You heard when someone ground their teeth. You noticed when someone sobbed into their arm. You felt when a child rolled too close, their toes brushing your ribs, small and cold and utterly unaware of boundaries. And you didn't complain. Or if you did, it was softly, through a sigh or a slight shift. Words were rarely used. They broke the illusion that everyone was sleeping peacefully, even if no one truly was. One fringe account, written in the margin of a 15th century household ledger, describes a young servant girl who used to sing in her sleep. Not songs with words, but sounds, half melodies, long drawn-out hums like a lullaby only she could hear. At first the others found it strange, but over time, they came to rely on it. When she stopped for a week, due to illness, the room felt colder, empty. Her humming had become a part of their nights, a kind of accidental comfort. It's those tiny details, historians say, that remind us what shared sleep actually meant. It wasn't just practicality, it was connection, even when unspoken. Even the transitions mattered. The process of going to bed wasn't abrupt. There were rituals, small ones. People undressed slowly, folded their garments, lined up shoes near the door. Someone might poke at the fire, hoping for just a little more heat before it was allowed to die out. Another might rearrange the hay beneath the blanket, trying to find the least prickly spot. Mothers tucked their children into corners. Older siblings negotiated who got the warmer edge, and eventually, someone would blow out the candle, and the room would fall into a deeper shade of dark. Not black, never truly black, but dark enough that only outlines remained. Shadows on shadows, and in that dimness, the final sounds began, breaths deepening, blankets rustling, the last few whispers floating like feathers. But sleep, once it finally settled in, was fragile. The body's rest was vulnerable in such crowded quarters. A nightmare might shake someone awake, a cry piercing the quiet. Children woke suddenly, calling for mothers even when they were inches away. Illness made its rounds at night, too, coughs that grew wetter, fevers that soaked through shifts. If someone was truly unwell, their presence changed the mood of the room. Sleep became tense. The communal bed, once a sanctuary, became a place of cautious listening. Who else will catch it? Should we move them? Should we move ourselves? And still, no one left. They stayed, night after night, in the same bed, under the same blanket, listening to the same noises. There was, sometimes, a kind of grace in it, the way people adjusted for each other. A man wakes coughing, and the woman beside him offers her portion of the blanket without a word. A child kicks and is gently repositioned by a half-asleep uncle. An elder, unable to rise alone, is helped by a neighbor they barely know. It's not affection, exactly. It's just what you do. There's an unwritten agreement if you're in the bed. You belong to the bed, and that means caring, just a little, for the bodies beside you. And when morning comes, the room doesn't explode into action. It stirs, slowly. One person rises, another follows. There's groaning, stretching, the quiet complaint of joints unbending. Someone curses at the cold. Someone else sneezes 3 times in a row. The blanket is folded, or not. The straw is shaken out, or not. The bed, if you can call it that, returns to being a bench, a floor, a table, and the people scatter off to work, to prayer, to the street. No one talks about who snored. No one mentions the whispered confession. The night was shared, but the day is private. You take your piece of warmth with you, invisible but real, folded in your chest like something sacred. You blink slowly in the half-light of morning, the taste of someone else's breath still clinging faintly in the air. It's not offensive, it's just there. Part of the thick, stale perfume that always lingers in a room full of sleepers. You sit up quietly, careful not to disturb the child tucked behind your knees, or the old woman still snoring faintly into her wool shawl. It's hard to remember exactly who ended up in which corner by the time sleep took you. The bodies rearrange themselves throughout the night, as they always do, like a pile of coats that shifts each time someone rustles beneath. But the real thing you'll remember from last night, the detail that will stick in your mind, is the sound. Not the creak of beds or the rustle of straw. No, it was the whispers. Those quiet, half-conscious exchanges that pass between people who think the others are already asleep. The things said in the dark, in the hushed space between dreams and dawn. Secrets, jokes, prayers, and sometimes things you wish you hadn't heard at all. A woman whispering to her husband that she saw something outside. A boy muttering the name of someone long dead. A soft recitation of scripture, or a burst of sudden, unfiltered honesty that no one would dare speak once the sun came up. This is the medieval bed's other life, not as a place of rest, but as a stage, a place of confession, of argument, of low-voiced planning. When the world quiets, people speak, you hear everything, whether you want to or not. One man talks in his sleep, describing his plan to cheat a neighbor at market. Another rambles about a field he used to own but lost to debt. Someone argues with a brother who isn't there. Someone laughs at a dream. All of this unfolds in the semi-dark, where bodies are still and minds are loose. The bed becomes a chamber of echoes. You lie there, eyes closed, pretending not to hear, because there's no other choice. To acknowledge what's said would be to break the unspoken rule. What happens between midnight and morning stays folded into the blanket. Of course, not all the sounds are so soft. A snore can become the loudest sound in the world when it starts close to your ear, especially the kind that stops and starts, the ones that drag on in sputtering crescendos like an old bellows gasping for life. You clench your teeth, you hold your breath, you consider nudging the person, but then what? They'll stop for a moment, shift, and it'll start again, slightly louder, as if in protest. You're stuck. You press your blanket over your ear and try to find rhythm in it. That's how most people survive the sounds of shared sleep. They make music out of it. A rhythm, a pattern, something to sync your breathing to. The wheeze becomes a drum, the cough, a cymbal, the whisper, a string note. It's absurd, but it works. Eventually, the mind tunes itself to the song of other people's bodies. And then there are the less charming sounds. Someone relieves themselves too close to the corner of the room. A chamber pot sloshes. Someone gags. You pull the blanket higher and pray it doesn't reach you. You consider how strange it is that this has become normal, that you can sleep in a room full of strangers, beside bodily noises and whispered memories, and still wake with the strength to carry a bucket or herd a sheep. But that's the truth of it. Shared sleep strips you of illusion. It turns the human body into just another object, warm, heavy, noisy. The mystery disappears. Romance dies in a room like this. Or maybe it's reborn as something else, an honesty you can't escape. Because this isn't just sleep. It's exposure, not just of flesh, but of self. You see people as they are. The snorer, the weeper, the sleeper who kicks, the one who wakes shouting. You learn more about someone from 2 nights in a shared bed than from a year of polite conversation. And you know that they've learned about you, too. That you grind your teeth, that you mumble names, that you twitch when the wind whistles through a crack in the shutters. Everyone becomes a little more real, a little more human, and a little more tired. Yet, somehow, there's comfort in that. No one here is pretending. No one has the energy. You're all equally wrinkled, equally puffy-eyed, equally vulnerable. There are no titles in the bed, just bodies trying to make it through the night without freezing or suffocating. The baker lies beside the midwife. The beggar sleeps a few feet from the priest. You all wake looking the same. Hair askew, blankets tangled, eyes swollen with dreams. It's leveling. Sleep has a way of removing status, even more than death. The bed is the great equalizer, worn, flat, and indifferent. Sometimes, the most unexpected conversations happen at the edge of sleep. A man turns to his sister and asks if she remembers the way their mother used to braid onions. A child asks what stars are made of. A woman, eyes still closed, says she dreamed of snow that fell upward. These aren't the kinds of things said during daylight. The world moves too fast. But here, in this half-dark lull, everything slows down enough for truth to slip out sideways. You don't reply. Or if you do, it's in a murmur, but you remember, and you carry it with you long after the bed is cold. And just as often, there's prayer. Not loud, not showy, but the soft repetition of familiar words. Hail Marys, Our Fathers, whispered litanies of saints' names, sometimes said into a pillow, or mouthed silently into the dark. It's not always pious, it's habit, a way to quiet the mind, a way to keep fear at bay. Because sleep is vulnerable. You don't know what dreams will come. You don't know if you'll wake. The prayer is not just for protection, it's for grounding. And hearing someone else say it beside you, their voice steady in the dark, is a kind of shared shield. You realize, in a strange way, that all of this, the whispers, the sounds, the sighs and secrets, is part of what sleep is in this world. Not just the absence of waking, but the presence of others. In modern life, we tend to think of rest as a solo act, a retreat, a boundary drawn. But in the medieval bed, sleep is a gathering, a ritual, a communion, bodies linked by warmth and weariness, minds slowly unraveling together until silence takes over again. So you lie back down, turn your face to the wall, and let yourself sink. Someone's breathing near your shoulder. Someone shifts behind you. A whisper flickers and fades. The last log on the hearth gives a final crackle before going cold. You exhale, you surrender, not just to sleep, but to the night itself, the strange, imperfect, noisy tapestry of lives braided together under one blanket, in one room, breathing the same air. And in that surrender, you find the rarest kind of rest. Not peace, not quiet, but belonging. You shift under the blanket, feeling the familiar press of another body beside you. Nothing new, nothing surprising, but tonight, something is different. You notice it slowly, like the way you notice a draft creeping across your ankles, or the way a candle guttering in the corner starts to cast new shadows. The room feels fuller than usual, not with more bodies, but with a different kind of closeness. You open your eyes for a moment, not to see, but to sense. A child's foot brushes your shin. A man sighs deeply, the kind of sigh that carries years inside it. You hear the soft rustle of someone adjusting their nightclothes, or what little of them there are, and then a whisper, she's dreaming again. You don't know who she is, but the voice is familiar. You've heard it every night for the past week, as consistent as the snore from the man by the door, or the wet cough of the old woman near the hearth. You're in someone's home, maybe your own, maybe not, and the sleeping arrangements are what they've always been: fluid, improvised, necessary. But what makes this particular night so striking is the fact that even married couples don't sleep alone. You'd think marriage would afford a couple the right to their own bed, their own space, maybe a door to close, or at the very least a curtain to draw. But in most homes, especially among the working classes, there's no such thing as a marital bedroom. There's just the room, one large, multifunctional space where meals are cooked, tools are stored, arguments are held, and everyone sleeps together. Children, cousins, servants, and yes, the married couple too. Their bed might be larger, might have slightly better stuffing, might even be pushed up against a wall to suggest some semblance of separation. But that's all it is, suggestion. Because come nightfall, the space fills. Children climb into bed with their parents, especially the youngest ones. A servant lies across the foot, still in her apron. A visiting relative wraps himself in a wool cloak and lays down nearby, close enough to overhear every sigh. And so, husbands and wives share their sleep not just with each other, but with the household. Their private relationship, if it's private at all, is layered beneath the realities of shared warmth and limited room. You learn to whisper, or not at all. You learn to wait for rare moments of quiet, or you simply stop pretending the bed is a private place. Love is performed in whispers, in glances across the supper table, in the way he folds your shift neatly before bed, or the way she nudges the blanket to your side when she thinks you're still asleep. You get used to being overheard, and the people around you get used to pretending they didn't hear. This constant, quiet exposure creates an unusual intimacy among bedfellows, not just between spouses, but among the entire group. You begin to anticipate each other's movements. You know who talks in their sleep, who always wakes before dawn, who needs more room, and who barely stirs. You become familiar with the rhythm of the group, a sleepy tide that flows and shifts throughout the night. It's like breathing together, and sometimes, when a fight breaks out during the day between a husband and wife, or siblings, or parent and child, it lingers into the night. You feel it in the silence between them, in the way they lie on opposite sides of the bed, backs turned, limbs drawn in the stiffness of shared blankets, The bed becomes a stage for conflict as much as for comfort. But unlike daylight arguments, nighttime doesn't leave room for storming out or slamming doors. You all stay, you all lie down together. And by morning, maybe something has softened. Sometimes the opposite happens. Joy seeps into the night. A celebration from earlier still bubbles beneath the surface. A wedding feast, a child's birthday, someone safe returned from a long journey. The energy hums through the bodies in the bed. And even in half sleep, you can feel it: lighter breaths, softer sighs, a warmth that goes beyond the fire. Someone might sing quietly, a lullaby, a folk song, a tune from years ago. It drifts through the dark like steam, unacknowledged but welcome, and you feel it settle over everyone like a second blanket. But there are other nights, too. Nights when grief enters the bed, when someone is missing, a child taken by fever, a father lost to war, a wife buried just days before. You notice the gap immediately, not just the empty space on the mattress, but the quiet that follows, the absence of a snore, the blanket that no longer needs tugging. The air feels colder, as if the missing person took their warmth with them, and grief, in a shared bed, doesn't stay quiet for long. Someone cries, not loudly, not with gasping sobs, just that slow, broken breathing that people try to muffle in a pillow, and no one says anything, no one moves, but you feel someone reach out, blindly, and touch the mourner's shoulder, just once, just enough. These are the emotional topographies of the medieval bed, a space that holds far more than sleep, a space that absorbs joy, anger, sadness, love, a space that knows your secrets, your dreams, your body, your breath, and everyone else's too. It teaches you patience, teaches you to coexist in the most literal way, to lie beside someone night after night and not speak, not fight, not flee. You learn how to care for people simply by sleeping near them, by learning when to shift and when to stay still, when to offer your share of the blanket, and when to feign sleep to give someone privacy. It's not ideal. Of course it's not. There are fleas. The straw pokes. The mattress dips in the middle and pushes everyone together like dough in a bowl. But it works. It has to work. And you adapt. Because that's what humans do. We make nests. We make space. We share breath, even when we'd rather not. And we sleep together not because it's romantic, but because it's survival. So tonight, once again, you pull your knees in close and settle your arm under your head. You feel the familiar weight of another person behind you. Maybe your brother, maybe your child, maybe your wife, maybe a stranger. It doesn't really matter. The rhythm of shared sleep begins again. The creak of the bed, the softest mutter of a dream, a foot kicking off the blanket, someone snoring already, someone whispering a prayer. You close your eyes and let it all happen. Because this is not just where you rest, it's where you live. You wouldn't expect diplomacy to happen in a bed, but here you are, lying on a mattress with 5 other people, 2 of whom are from a different village, 1 of whom you're pretty sure stole a chicken last summer, and another who was just yesterday arguing about oxen prices with your uncle, and somehow, in the murky twilight of half sleep, they're all whispering terms, not legal ones, not the kind that get scratched into parchment, but real terms nonetheless. Offers, apologies, quiet admissions, and conditional truces, shared across shared breath and shared blankets. Because in the medieval world, the bed isn't just where people sleep, it's where they negotiate, reveal, and recalibrate their positions. And not only peasants. Lords did this too. Courts, councils, even clergymen. A soft voice in the night might accomplish what no daylight meeting could. You'd be amazed how often history turned on the warmth of a shared mattress and the muffled honesty that only seems to surface in the dark. It's because in that strange place between exhaustion and dreaming, the walls people build during the day start to crumble when you're horizontal, vulnerable, cold, and trying to keep the wind from creeping under your cloak. You're not thinking like a strategist or a soldier. You're thinking like a human. Your words come out slower. Your thoughts are less guarded. You might finally admit, under your breath, that yes, the grain shipment was delayed because you underpaid the driver. Or you confess that you didn't mean to curse at the reeve. It just slipped out. You whisper it to your brother, your cousin, your rival lying beside you in the warmth of shared fatigue. He grunts, maybe, or doesn't answer at all. But in the morning, something feels lighter. No official resolution was reached, and yet something shifted. That's the power of the bed. The communal bed becomes the silent backdrop to all kinds of quiet drama. It holds everything, not just sleep, but the subtleties of politics, the agreements no one dares to formalize in public, the favors granted with a nudge rather than a nod, the alliances sealed not with a handshake, but with the absence of a shove when someone rolls too close in the night. You know that letting your uncle's rival sleep nearest the fire doesn't mean you've forgiven him, but it means you didn't deny him warmth. And that, in this context, is a gesture. In a world where nothing is wasted, not a crumb, not a patch of cloth, not a square foot of sleeping space, generosity in the bed carries weight. Sometimes these negotiations are more literal. You've seen it with merchants, two men sharing a lumpy inn bed after a long day at the fair, murmuring through their terms of trade just before sleep. No scribe, no seal, just two voices weaving trust into the quilted quiet. One promises to send his wagon by Michaelmas. The other agrees not to raise his price until Lent. Nothing is official, but both wake up with the feeling that something binding has occurred. And sometimes it has. Historians still argue whether these whispered agreements were legally enforceable. In practice, most weren't. But socially, absolutely. Break a promise you murmured before sleep, and the entire village might hear of it before the sun sets. And what about the ceremonial bed, that strange platform of ritual, dignity, and performance where births are witnessed? Blessings are spoken, and death is expected to arrive with dignity. In wealthier homes, the bed is not just furniture, it's a kind of stage. The birthing bed is decorated, sometimes even moved to the center of the room, where midwives, family, and servants gather to witness new life arrive. The mother groans, bites cloth, cries out not in privacy, but in company. Her pain is public. Her bed is surrounded by helping hands. And once the baby is born, the bed becomes a place of celebration. Relatives visit, gifts are laid at the foot, bread is broken on its edge. The same bed where conception may have occurred now holds the child of that act, surrounded by the same people who likely heard every creak of it in the night. And if someone's dying, they don't die alone. Not if they can help it. A good death means being witnessed. A shared bed means someone's always there, to fetch the priest, to hold the hand, to whisper prayers into the fading ears. There are even customs where a dying man is moved to the household bed, not because it's comfortable, but because it's meaningful. He dies where others were born, where others slept, where others dreamed. His last breath becomes part of the mattress's history. You lie beside him that night and feel the quiet change in the way others breathe. Not grief, yet just awareness. A silence sharper than usual. A space that used to hold life, now making room for death. The bed, then, becomes a ledger of the household's most pivotal moments. Marriages begin there, sometimes on display, sometimes in secret. Babies arrive there, greeted by warm cloth and chanted psalms. Family disputes cool beneath its blankets, and death curls into its folds, soft and final. It holds every role stage, witness, accomplice, grave. You don't always notice how much the bed sees, but it sees everything. And the people around it, they know. This is why it's not unusual for people to call the bed by name. Not just the bed, but our bed, the good bed, the long bed, grandfather's bed. It's not a piece of furniture. It's a character in the household. It remembers. It holds history in its sagging frame and stained linen. You can trace generations through its repairs. The newer wood spliced into old. The patch of fabric that came from a wedding gown. The scorched mark from the night a candle fell too close. Every scratch is a memory. Every creak is a reminder. You don't throw it out. You don't even move it if you can help it. It stays where it has always been, bearing silent witness to lives that unfold and unravel in its embrace. And still, somehow, it manages to be just a bed. You return to it every night, muscles sore, clothes stiff with work. You flop onto it beside whoever's turn it is to be closest to the fire, and you let the day drain from your limbs. It doesn't matter if it's politics or prophecy, or just the weight of another season past it all ends the same. You sleep, you wake, you do it again. The bed is the place where the cycle renews, where grudges fade, if only for a few hours, where ideas sprout in dreams and decisions grow in silence, where your body forgets what it carried and remembers only how to rest. So tonight, as you settle in, you listen for the signs. A muttered name, a shifted blanket, a whispered plan. You might not respond. You might pretend to be asleep, but you're listening. Everyone is, because in this bed, beneath this roof, the night is never just rest. It's a chamber of possibility, a quiet parliament of bodies, a place where the next day's peace might be born not in speeches, but in shared breath, accidental forgiveness, and the wordless act of not turning away. You're on your back again, pressed shoulder to shoulder with someone whose name you still don't know, staring at the soot-stained rafters of what the locals call a guest house, though nothing about it feels like hospitality. The floor's dirt, the ceiling leaks. The only warmth in the room comes from the pile of humans stacked like firewood near the far wall, where the embers of last night's fire still glow faintly under a crust of ash. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the sleeping child curled against your side, and draw your cloak tighter across your chest. This isn't a home. This isn't even an inn. This is what they call a poorhouse, or sometimes more generously, a pilgrim's rest. But what it really is, you realize as your eyes adjust to the low light and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space, is a kind of unspoken contract you give up your privacy, your pride, your need to stretch your limbs, and in return, you don't freeze to death. These makeshift shelters exist in nearly every medieval town. You'll find them near churches, under bridges, in abandoned sheds offered by sympathetic lords or pious monks. No keys, no locks, no bed frames, just a floor and a roof, and a pile of shared misery. There are rules, sure, though none are written. You sleep where there's space, you don't ask questions, you don't talk too loud, and you certainly don't snore, if you can help it. If you're new, you take the coldest spot near the door, near the wall, near the wind. If you're old or ill or visibly suffering, someone might shift to make room, but no promises. The blanket is not big enough for everyone. The fire never lasts till dawn. You make do. It's not as bleak as it sounds. Not always. Some nights, a kind of camaraderie takes hold. Someone passes around a crust of bread, saved from supper. Someone else offers a swallow of watered wine. An old man starts humming a tune, and a woman across the room joins in, her voice cracked but warm. Laughter happens occasionally, not loud, not long, but real. You remember that, all of you, despite the smell and the cold and the lice and the hunger, are still human, still trying, still worthy of song. But then there are the hard nights, when it rains and the roof leaks, when a stranger enters too late and too drunk, stumbles over sleeping forms, curses, gropes, collapses, when someone coughs too much and people edge away slowly, shifting their limbs as if in sleep, forming gaps where closeness had been, or worse, when someone dies. It happens quietly. An elder doesn't wake. A fever takes a child. A woman slips into stillness, unnoticed until morning. And when it does, there's no ceremony, just silence. Someone checks for breath. Another rises, finds a blanket to drape. The body is left there for a while. What else can be done? The poorhouse doesn't mourn loudly. It simply continues. The others turn back toward the wall, close their eyes, and try not to think. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. If you feel too much, you won't survive the week. So you fold your sorrow into the rhythm of the room. You sleep beside death and wake beside life. It's always been that way. And even in these cramped quarters, there is hierarchy. Not official, not enforced, but understood. The strong get more space. The elderly get the warmest corner if someone remembers to make room. Women often cluster together, backs pressed in a defensive line, their children between them. Men give a wider berth, or they don't. And then there are arguments. About space, about smell, about who stole the cloak, or moved the pot, or kicked someone in the night. Voices rise, threats are muttered. Sometimes a fight breaks out, but mostly, it doesn't. The room polices itself. As all tight rooms do, people know how far they can push. You get used to it. You learn the signals, when to speak and when to stay quiet. When someone's silence means fear and when it means exhaustion, you learn to sleep with your back to the wall or your hands under your tunic. You learn not to make eye contact with the new arrivals. You learn who snores and who sweats and who starts crying in their sleep right around the same time each night. It's strange. This intimacy with strangers, you don't know their names. You might never see them again, but you've heard them whisper dreams, seen them half naked, smelled their breath, shared their heat. You've seen their vulnerability laid bare not in words, but in the way they flinch when touched or curl around a memory. There's something almost holy in it, this surrender to discomfort for the sake of shelter, not sacred like a cathedral, but sacred like a campfire, temporary, fragile, necessary. And then, of course, there's the occasional absurdity. The man who talks in rhyme verse all night. The woman who insists on sleeping with a chicken under her blanket. The child who refuses to lie down unless someone tells a story, any story. You lie there, eyes closed, smiling at the ridiculousness of it all. Because what else can you do? Life doesn't stop just because you're poor. It keeps happening. Right there, beneath the rafters and over the straw. One record from a 14th century London church notes that the local poorhouse had space for 10 bedding spots, but regularly held over 30 occupants. The priest described it as a shipwreck of humanity, barely afloat on the tides of sleep. He meant it as a criticism, but it reads now like a kind of poetry, because that's what it feels like. Sometimes adrift, all of you in the same leaking vessel, huddled close against the waves of cold, hunger, and time. And still, you wake, you stretch, you rise. Someone groans, someone laughs, someone throws open the door and lets in the cold morning light, and everyone winces at once. You blink, rub your eyes, and gather your things. The blanket is left folded, or not. The straw is kicked into place, or not. The dead are remembered, briefly, or not. You leave as you came in silence or with a nod. And maybe, just maybe, you'll return tonight. Or you'll sleep in a barn, or in a field, or not at all. But wherever you go, the memory of this place follows. Of the bodies that made room for you. Of the stranger who didn't speak but pressed the blanket closer when you shivered. Of the song that rose like steam in the darkness. Of the child who dreamed aloud. Of the old woman's breath, slow and steady, until it wasn't. Because the poorhouse, as miserable as it may seem, is still a kind of home. Not because it belongs to anyone, but because it holds everyone, equally, uneasily, completely. You share your night with strangers, and in doing so, you share something else, your need, your fear, your fragile, flickering hope that tomorrow will be kinder. You hear the creak of leather boots before you see him, the nobleman, or maybe just a well-dressed merchant, ducking into the low-beamed guest quarters of the manor house, a fur-trimmed cloak clutched tightly against his chest. He stinks of horse sweat and travel dust. Despite the lace at his cuffs and the polished buckle at his throat, he glances around the room, and the frown on his face says everything this isn't what he expected. You almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Because now he gets to learn what every seasoned traveler already knows. Titles don't keep out fleas. Wealth doesn't warm stone walls. And even the most finely tailored breeches are no protection against the scratch of shared hay and the weight of snoring strangers. He steps over a pair of muddy boots and hesitates, scanning the room for a bed that doesn't exist. There's straw. There's a low pallet in the corner occupied. There are bodies stretched across benches and under tables. And there's one bare spot near the hearth, half shadowed by a pile of kindling and a sleeping dog. He takes it. Of course he does. Because even noble guests have to lie down somewhere. These guest beds in noble houses are rarely actual beds. Their space is claimed, assigned, or tolerated. A real bed, with a frame and curtains and embroidered sheets, is reserved for the lord, the lady, and sometimes their most intimate guests. Everyone else is sorted like livestock who arrived first, who's in favor, who can be trusted not to snore too loud or steal the spoons. The nobleman, if he is, one removes his cloak, folds it beneath his head, and lies back gingerly, trying not to wrinkle anything. But within minutes, he's curled into himself like everyone else, cloak be damned, because warmth and rest always win over vanity. And around him, the room shifts. You're already lying in your corner, used to the draft, used to the noise, used to the peculiar intimacy of sleeping near people you barely know. You watch him with the half-amused, half-tired curiosity of someone who's seen this scene play out a dozen times. The fancy man trying to keep clean in a place that hasn't seen hot water in a week. The whispered grumbling when he turns over and takes more than his share of blanket. The inevitable sneeze when he discovers that even the softest straw carries dust. You wonder how long it'll take before he gives up entirely, and admits, at least to himself, that his station means very little in this room. Because here, in this guest chamber of a manor that smells faintly of dogs and mildew, everyone is brought to the same level. The laws of shared sleep are universal. Keep your limbs to yourself. Don't cough too loudly. Share the blanket. Rotate with the group if someone needs to turn. And above all, don't complain. Complaining gets you nothing but a stern look from the steward and a cold spot on the floor. You think of the woman who slept here last night, she of noble blood, with too many rings and not enough common sense. She spent the first hour insisting she wouldn't stay in such conditions. By morning, she was asleep beside the fire with her hands tucked under the arm of the baker's wife, both of them snoring in unison. You've seen all kinds pass through these guest quarters. Traveling knights with rusted armor and missing teeth. Foreign merchants who sleep with one eye open and a dagger under the blanket. Tired messengers clutching sealed letters even in their dreams. Once, a bishop slept here curled beneath a borrowed wool cloak, his holy ring pressed against his cheek like a talisman. He didn't complain. He just slept, deeply, probably for the first time in weeks, because even luxury can be exhausting, and sometimes what the body needs isn't perfume and a feather mattress. It's simply the comfort of knowing other bodies are nearby, breathing in the dark. That's the unspoken appeal of these communal beds' presence. You are not alone, not in cold, not in discomfort, not in fear, and even the noble guest, once he stops shifting and sighing and pulling at his collar, seems to realize this. He lets his head fall to the side, his breathing slows, his hands unclench. The firelight flickers across his face, softening the hard lines, the worried brow. Maybe he's dreaming of his own bed, his own chamber, his own space. But tonight, he's here, with you, with all of you, and the bed, such as it is, holds him just the same. Of course, no one talks about this in polite company. The idea that nobility ever sleeps cheek to jowl with peasants doesn't fit the image. But it happens. Travel flattens hierarchies, illness, urgency. Weather, none of it cares for titles. And when the road turns muddy and the next manor is 2 days away, even the proudest lord accepts the blanket passed to him by a tired stable boy. Maybe he grumbles. Maybe he tips more in the morning. Maybe he never speaks of it again. But he remembers, and you do too. One curious tale from a 15th century manor ledger tells of a Danish diplomat who, during a storm delay, shared a guest chamber with a blacksmith, a cook, and the daughter of a minor noble. They slept in shifts, 2 on the floor, 2 on the bench, and rotated every few hours. By morning, the cook and the diplomat had brokered a deal for salted fish exports. The girl and the blacksmith had agreed to elope. The ledger doesn't say how much of that held up, but the steward's note simply reads, 4 arrived strangers. Departed content. It's a strange kind of diplomacy, forged not over wine and parchment, but over shared hay and mutual exhaustion. And sometimes, the bed sees more subtle transactions. A noble guest might learn humility. A servant might feel, for a few hours, like an equal. A child might tuck their cold feet into the warmth of a stranger and learn that safety doesn't always wear a family's face. These are the lessons that stick, not written down, not celebrated, just lived, night after night, in guest chambers like this one all across the land. You roll over, pulling your cloak higher, and listen to the room breathe. Someone near the window shifts in their sleep. The nobleman mutters something unintelligible and falls silent. The fire pops, releasing a slow ember into the air like a tired firefly. You close your eyes. Another day of travel waits. Another night in another strange bed. But for now, this one will do. Not because it's comfortable, but because it's shared. And in that, there's a kind of peace. You don't fall asleep tonight, because it isn't your night to sleep. You're the night watcher, the one who stays awake while the others rest. You're back against a cold timber beam, your eyes half lidded, but always scanning the edges of the room. You're not here because you want to be. You're here because someone has to be. In larger households or crowded traveler inns, one person always stays alert to tend the fire, to listen for thieves, to make sure that no one rolls too close to the edge of a loft, or forgets a candle burning too near the bedding. It's not a formal post, no badge, no special payment, just a quiet duty passed along by necessity. Sometimes it's the servant who draws the short straw, sometimes it's the eldest son, sometimes it's just the one who couldn't sleep to begin with. And tonight, that's you. Your companions are scattered like driftwood across the room, curled in corners, slumped against walls, one even propped halfway upright in a chair, chin against chest. Their shapes are vague outlines in the flickering firelight, a still life of exhaustion. You know their names, or most of them, but here, in the dark, they're just breath and wool and the occasional twitch. You don't envy them. They'll be stiff and groggy in the morning. But for now, they're peaceful, and you tucked into your blanket with your legs folded and your hands warm around a clay mug are the guardian of the peace. The room is quiet. Mostly, there's the fire, cracking softly. There's the occasional snore, of course. And then there's the house itself, breathing through the wood. Old timbers groan when the wind shifts. Rats rustle between the walls. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, then again. You don't move. You know this soundtrack. You've heard it since childhood. It's the music of the medieval night, not silence, but presence. Alive, layered, full. Every sound carries a message. That bump near the pantry is just the bread settling in its basket. That creak by the door was the wind, not a footstep. Probably, you lean forward, just to be sure. Being the night watcher means you notice things others miss. The way one sleeper pulls the blanket tighter every hour, as if battling unseen cold. The way another whispers names sometimes different, sometimes the same like a litany of lost people. You learn who mumbles, who shifts, who doesn't move at all. The still ones are the most worrying. Every so often, you have to lean in close, just to hear the breath, just to make sure they're still here. Sometimes, the night stretches long and uneventful. You poke the fire, you sip your water, you count the knots in the beam above your head. Other times, it's alive with tension. Someone wakes suddenly, gasping from a nightmare. Someone else begins to cry quietly, their face turned to the wall. You don't always know what to do. You're not the priest, you're not the mother, you're just the one awake. So you sit beside them, you offer your presence like a blanket, silent and steady. Sometimes it's enough, sometimes it isn't. But you stay, and occasionally, the night watcher sees things no one else will ever know. Not ghosts, though. Some swear they've glimpsed them, but truths. A moment when the father who never cries wakes weeping from a dream. A moment when the stoic traveler begins murmuring prayers in a language you don't recognize. The moment when a child sleeps with their arms wrapped around their own chest because no one else is near. These aren't things you speak of. The watcher sees, but doesn't say. The watcher hears, but holds it in. That's part of the role. You think, sometimes, about why people sleep in groups. The practical answer is warmth. Of course, safety. But there's something deeper, something older. Humans aren't built for solitude. Not really. You think of wolves in a den, of birds roosting together in the trees, of old women sleeping beside their great-grandchildren, their breathing synchronized like waves lapping the shore. There's comfort in it, in the way hearts slow down when another is near, in the way sleep comes easier when someone else is awake. You sip from your mug again. The fire's nearly out now. You should add another log, but you hesitate. The sound might wake them, and they look so peaceful. These people you barely know, but somehow feel responsible for. So you shuffle forward on quiet feet, lift a single dry branch, and set it gently into the coals. It catches, sparks rise, no one stirs. You sit back down. Outside, the night deepens. The stars are high. The cold presses against the walls, testing for cracks. You pull your blanket tighter and let your mind drift, not into sleep, but into something like it, a quiet reverie. You think about the people you're watching, where they'll go tomorrow, whether they'll remember this night. Most won't. Sleep blurs the edges of memory, but you'll remember. You always do. The night is yours. You remember a winter years ago, when you sat watch beside your grandfather's deathbed. He didn't speak, just breathed. Then didn't. You didn't cry. Not then. Just sat beside him until the others woke. That was the first time you realized what the night holds, not just sleep, but endings, beginnings, everything in between. Since then, you've never minded being the one awake. You think of that tonight, watching the rise and fall of chests, the way the firelight moves across sleeping faces. This is your task, not a punishment, not a burden, a gift, in its own way. You guard their dreams. You keep the cold at bay. You make sure the world doesn't slip too far from safety while they rest. And when morning comes, because it always does, you'll be the first to stir. You'll prod the fire back to life. You'll fill the water jug. You'll greet the others with a nod, maybe a quiet word. You won't say what you saw. You won't say who cried, or who whispered, or who dreamed so deeply they smiled in their sleep. You'll let the new day begin as if none of it happened, because it's not yours to share, only to witness. So you shift once more against the beam. You breathe in slow. You listen. The wind has changed. A rooster crows. Far off, the sky is beginning to gray. One of the sleepers rolls over and pulls their blanket higher. Another lets out a deep, satisfied sigh. You close your eyes not to sleep, but just to rest them. A few more minutes. Then the room will wake. Then the rhythm will change. But for now, the night still belongs to you. And in its quiet, flickering heart, you keep watch. You lie down, already exhausted, already sore from the day's labor. But something about the room feels heavier than usual. The air is thick, not with heat, but with the kind of silence that presses against your chest. It's the kind of silence you don't trust. The fire is still glowing faintly in the corner. The bodies are all there, tucked under shared cloaks and blankets, breathing in their usual rhythms. But there's another shape tonight, one that wasn't here yesterday. It's lying against the wall, completely still, not asleep, not even breathing. A shape that used to be someone, and suddenly, the bed isn't just crowded with life, it's shared with death. You roll onto your side and stare at the ceiling, trying not to look at the bundle near the door, covered with cloth. You're not scared. Exactly. This isn't the first time, but still, your breath catches. You're not sure whether you're meant to sleep more carefully or more quietly. Death doesn't wait for convenience. It doesn't pause for privacy. In the medieval world, there's no sterile hospital room, no gentle separation of the living from the dying. People pass where they lie, and often they lie where others still sleep. A person might fall ill in the bed and never get up again, might cough for a week, then one day simply go quiet. And when that happens, the others don't leap up in panic. They don't scream or rush out of the room. They lie there. They listen. They wait. And eventually, someone gets up, covers the face, and pulls the blanket a little tighter. Not because it's protocol, but because it's instinct. You respect the body. You make space. Even if there is none, you shift your limbs around it and carry on. And sometimes, There isn't even time to move the body. Not until morning, or not until the burial is prepared. So you sleep with the dead. Not figuratively, literally. They stay there beside you, wrapped, still, silent. You feel their absence like a weight. Not a ghost, though you think about ghosts more often now, but a presence that has stopped being present. The bed doesn't change. The bodies around you breathe and sigh and roll over, but something in the room is still, too still, and that stillness changes the quality of the dark. Sometimes, the dead aren't strangers. Sometimes it's someone you knew, slept beside for months, shared warmth and hay and whispered dreams. A child who used to curl into your side, a grandmother who muttered prayers in her sleep, a friend whose snore was familiar, even comforting. And now, they're gone. You don't say anything. You lie still. Your eyes sting, but don't cry. Not yet. The morning will come in the morning. For now, the bed still holds you both, for one last night. And this closeness to death, it's not uncommon. Medieval homes are full, but life is short. Disease moves fast. Accidents happen. You get used to watching people go. Not easily, but regularly. And the bed, strange as it seems, is where many of them go. Not on battlefields, not in carriages, but here, between a cousin and a neighbor, under a patched blanket, in a room full of sleep, the same place they were born, the same place they once laughed, the same place they now lie, cooling by the hour. There are superstitions, of course. You've heard them whispered, that the soul lingers in the bed for a night, that you mustn't lie in the same spot too soon, that the dead can pull you into their dreams if you fall asleep too close. Some say to sprinkle salt around the pallet. Others say to keep a candle burning at the foot. But in most homes, there's no time for rituals. You do what you can. You say a prayer. You cross yourself. You keep your eyes closed tighter than usual. You listen for breathing, and if you don't hear it, you don't ask questions until morning. And yet, even among the fear, there's a kind of peace in it. The body isn't abandoned. It isn't hidden away. It remains in the warmth of the room, surrounded by the life it once touched. There's no cold chamber, no distant cart, just the same bed, the same blanket, the same quiet companionship. You'd want the same, wouldn't you? To be among your people, to be part of the living, even after you've left. You lie there and wonder if the others are thinking it too. If they're offering a silent farewell, or if they've simply accepted it, as they have so many times before. You think of the old woman last winter, the one who slipped away in her sleep. No one knew until dawn. When the others woke, they found her smiling. No struggle, no sound, just gone. They lit a candle and let it burn beside her all day, not because the church required it, but because it felt right. That night, no one slept in her spot. They left it empty, a dent in the straw where her shape had been. The next night, someone finally lay there, quietly, gently, and life continued. The bed remembers, you think. It absorbs more than warmth. It absorbs presence and absence. It holds not just bodies, but echoes. You feel them sometimes, not as ghosts, but as memories that have soaked into the cloth. A scent, a rhythm, a crease in the blanket that never quite goes away. You don't speak of it, but you know. And if you think this custom of sleeping beside the dead ended long ago, it didn't. Even now, people keep vigil. Even now, a child might lie beside a dying parent for one last night of closeness, not because they have to, but because something in the human body refuses to let go so easily. We cling. We lie beside. We watch the breathing stop, and we don't get up. Not right away. We hold the silence until it feels full enough to carry. Tonight, the body near the door is wrapped in linen. Someone has placed a sprig of rosemary on the chest, a gesture, a barrier, a hope. The others sleep, or pretend to. You lie still. Your eyes adjust. The shape remains. You don't fear it, but you acknowledge it. And slowly, as your breathing settles into the rhythm of those still alive, You offer a final kindness, you keep the silence unbroken. You let the room be still. You let the night do its work. Because in this bed, shared and sacred and flawed, even the dead deserve company. Even the dying deserve to be surrounded by warmth, by bodies, by breath. There's dignity in that. Not the kind sung in ballads, but the kind felt in the hush of a midnight room, where someone slips away and someone else whispers a prayer into the dark. So you close your eyes, you listen to the silence, and for now, you keep the space beside you warm. You can tell the feast was a good one because the snoring starts earlier than usual. Bodies are strewn across the hall like spilled grain men in half-buttoned tunics. Women still wearing flower garlands from the midday procession. Children collapse mid-giggle. Some sleep under tables, arms tucked beneath flour-dusted faces. Others have simply dropped where they danced, legs tangled, mouths slightly open, heads resting against barrels, baskets, boots. The air is thick with the scent of roasted meat, spilled wine, sweat, and joy fermenting now into the sour, sleepy fog of a communal slumber. You're lucky enough to have found a place along the wall, tucked between a cousin and an uncle who mumbles in his dreams. The straw beneath you is warm, still holding the heat of the sun, and a borrowed cloak is slung over your chest. Around you, the celebration fades not with a bang, but a yawn. Even the fiddler fell asleep with the bow still clutched in his hand. This is festival sleep, messy, spontaneous, and entirely unstructured. No one planned it, no one assigned beds. The great hall wasn't meant for rest, but merriment. But when night fell and the bonfire died down, everyone simply found the nearest soft spot and surrendered. There's no shame in it. After all, hospitality during feast days is an unwritten law. If the host is generous, and they always are on holy days, no one is turned away. Not even the drunk uncle who broke the stool, or the peddler who arrived uninvited but with a good story. Everyone stays, everyone sleeps, and for one night, even the poorest man shares a roof with the reeve and the tanner and the widow who makes the best pickled beets. It's a strange thing, this kind of sleep, half sacred, half chaotic. There are children tucked between dogs and baskets. A boy rests his head on a jug. A woman lies on her back, arms spread like she's still dancing. Someone snores. Someone hums a lullaby meant for no one in particular, and no one seems to mind. Because on nights like these, when the ale has flowed and the bread was warm, and the fiddle was quick, and the air smelled of sweet herbs and burnt pine, the boundaries between people dissolve. You don't worry about where you'll sleep. You just trust there will be space. And usually, there is. Sometimes, a corner of the hall is reserved for elders. Their blankets laid out early, their backs to the wall, their boots already off before the sun finishes setting. They snore the loudest, but no one dares disturb them. Elsewhere, the teenagers make a pile arms thrown over each other, laughter still simmering in their bones. The youngest children sleep first, dropped where they stood, carried to quieter corners by older siblings or aunties, and the rest, they simply fall like leaves, one by one, wherever the music stopped. There's no fire here, just the remnants of candles and the warmth of so many bodies. You feel it in the air, thick, damp, comforting in a way you didn't expect. The closeness isn't claustrophobic, it's grounding. You feel the rise and fall of breath around you. You feel the thump of someone's pulse against your back. You hear a murmur, a rustle, the creak of a bench as someone shifts. It's alive, this room, a hive of shared exhaustion, a chorus of limbs and dreams. And yet, somehow, it feels safe. No locks, no guards, just presence. Mutual trust born not of loyalty, but of laughter. You know that man beside you cried earlier when the old song was played. You know the girl across the room picked too many flowers and wore them like a crown until they wilted. You saw the priest raise his mug higher than he meant to, and the blacksmith carry a child on his shoulders like he weighed nothing. These weren't secrets. They were offerings, shared moments that now make the silence easier. Sleep becomes a kind of gratitude. Of course, not everyone is asleep. You see someone still awake by the far wall, staring at the rafters. A farmer, maybe. His hands are calloused even in repose. Maybe he's thinking about the harvest. Maybe he's just listening. Some people need time to come down from joy. Others simply don't sleep well with noise. But he doesn't get up. He just lies still, eyes open, breathing with the rest of you. There's something dignified in that kind of stillness. Not impatient, just patient in a different way. There's no shame in drooling here. No shame in talking in your sleep, or in kicking someone accidentally. No one expects elegance. If someone rolls over and ends up tangled with a neighbor, they untangle without comment. If someone snores too loudly, they're nudged gently, not scolded. These aren't strangers, even if you don't know their names. They're part of your world now, part of this night. The room smells of everything at once: meat fat, burnt candles, damp wool, crushed flowers. It should be unpleasant, but somehow it isn't. It's rich, earthy, like a memory you forgot you had. You breathe it in and feel your muscles loosen, your thoughts slow. Someone laughs in their sleep, and a few people stir, but no one wakes. The laugh becomes part of the ambiance. You pull your borrowed cloak higher and let your hand rest on the straw. It crunches faintly beneath your fingers. You don't even remember lying down, but now you're here. One record from a 13th century village feast described the aftermath of a harvest celebration in almost poetic terms. They slept in joyful disorder, the warmth of one day's labor binding them in peace. No mention of lice, or spilled drink, or aching backs, just peace. Because for all its messiness, there's something clean about this kind of sleep. Not clean in the hygienic sense, let's be honest. The floor is filthy, but clean in spirit. Honest, unpretending, full of everything that makes people human. And perhaps that's why feast night sleep lingers in the memory more than the bed in your own home. You remember the warmth of elbows, the slow sighs, the dreams you had, wild and nonsensical, shaped by food and firelight and music. You remember waking to find someone using your shoulder as a pillow, and you didn't mind. You remember stretching as the sun crept through the high windows, and hearing someone softly singing, still half asleep. No one rushed to leave. They rose slowly, blinking, smiling, reaching for bread or water or each other's laughter. The party was over, but the night had done something else. It had made a family of the room, and that's the real magic of it. Not the food, not the songs, but the sleep that came after. The way everyone let their guard down at once. The way titles disappeared and differences blurred. And you all sank into the straw like children after a long game. You could never plan it, could never fake it. It only happened when it wanted to. And tonight, it happened again. You close your eyes now. Someone shifts beside you. Someone breathes out a dream. The room is warm, messy, full, and you feel it without doubt. Without question, you are exactly where you're meant to be. You wake just before dawn. Not because anyone calls your name or stirs you with a touch, but because your body knows. It always knows. The air has shifted. The light through the shutter cracks has gone from black to gray. The warmth from the bodies around you has begun to recede not from distance, but from waking. Someone stretches. Someone clears their throat. The room holds its breath between worlds, not night anymore, but not yet morning either. You remain still for a few extra seconds, savoring the last whispers of shared sleep, the comfort of limbs touching not out of love, but necessity, the hush of unvoiced dreams still lingering over the straw. Then you rise, slow and careful, slipping from beneath the corner of the blanket without disturbing the woman still curled beside you. Her hand twitches. Her breath is deep. You nod, though she can't see you. Some part of you still feels it's right to say goodbye. Your feet find the cold dirt floor. The fire has died to embers. Nothing but faint heat trapped in ash. You press your hands toward it anyway. Ritual, not function. The others are waking now, quietly. Nobody speaks. Voices are for later. First there are stretches, groans, yawns, and the creak of old bones and older wood. You watch it unfold like choreography, the way people roll over, pull on tunics, fold their blankets, rub their eyes with calloused fingers. The room is a map of motion now, Scattered but familiar. You've seen this play before. In a dozen villages, 100 beds, 1,000 mornings. And every time, it humbles you. Because despite the draft, the lice, the snoring, the fights, the night terrors, the cramped quarters, people still sleep, people still wake, and life resumes without complaint. You don't talk about the night. Not here, not in front of others. The things that happened, whispers, snores, movements, memories, they belong to the dark, to the bed, to that intimate, unrecorded space where vulnerability lives. You saw someone cry, someone prayed, someone kissed a child's forehead and held them tighter than usual. But now, as boots are tied and cloaks are folded, those truths fade with the shadows. You look across the room and meet the eye of a man who muttered someone's name in his sleep, perhaps a lover, perhaps a ghost. He looks away, and that's enough. You understand. Nothing more needs to be said. It's strange how quickly the bed transforms. Just minutes ago, it was the center of the world, a space where warmth and survival and story and sorrow coexisted. Now it's clutter, an obstacle to step over on the way to the bucket, or the bread, or the door. Someone kicks aside the blanket. Someone else lifts a sleeping child and gently wakes them with a whisper. The moment is gone, but not really. It's just packed away, like a folded shirt, like a song that only plays at night. You step outside into the chill and see the sky shifting to blue. Smoke is rising from chimneys down the lane. The world is waking in layers. You stretch your arms, you breathe, and you remember what it was like, just a few hours ago, to lie in the quiet dark, listening to the rhythm of strangers' hearts. It makes you feel strangely full. Not happy, exactly, but grounded, connected, as if some invisible thread was spun between you and all the others, weaving you into the same fabric, the same sleep, the same human need. And tonight, it will happen again, in another place, with different bodies, a different room, but the same truths will unfold, the same blanket will be pulled, the same breath will rise and fall. Someone will cry, someone will mumble nonsense, someone will snore so loudly it shakes the rafters, and someone will lie awake, watching it all, learning it like a secret language. You think maybe you'll be that person again? Or maybe not. Maybe you'll be the one who sleeps through the night, missing everything. Either way, you'll be part of it. The bed will be there. Maybe it's made of straw. Maybe it's the floor. Maybe it's a cart pulled into a barn. Maybe it's luxurious, with 4 posts and embroidered linen, but it doesn't matter. It never really has. What matters is the people, the heat, the compromise, the silent agreement to coexist, to soften, to make room. That's the real miracle, isn't it? Not that people slept, but that they did it together. And so the day begins. Bread is shared, boots are laced, children are carried. Someone curses the cold. Someone laughs at the memory of a fart in the night. Someone else begins humming as they sweep the floor, already forgetting who they dreamed about. And you, tired, aching, and somehow more whole than when you lay down, step out into the road, leaving behind not just a room, but an entire night's worth of unspoken communion. No one says goodbye. No one needs to. The bed said it for you. So now, as we come to the end of this quiet journey, take one more moment to imagine it. The shared room, the smell of wool and wood smoke, the gentle breathing of people you've never met and yet somehow understand, the fire low, the night soft, and the silence not empty, but full of memory, full of presence, full of lives that unfolded not with ceremony, but with a blanket passed to the left and a shoulder offered to the right. You've traveled through 100 beds tonight, none of them yours, and yet all of them familiar. You felt the scratch of straw, the weight of sleep, the press of strangers, and the comfort of knowing you were never truly alone. That's the part we forget in modern life, that sleep wasn't always silent or solitary. It was community. It was survival. It was kindness passed from body to body in the dark. So if your eyes are heavy now, If your breath has slowed, let yourself drift into that older rhythm. Let the room of the past hold you. Let its stories curl around your ears like a lullaby. You don't have to remember everything. Just this, you are part of something. A long, slow line of dreamers who shared the dark not out of luxury, but out of love. And now, sleep well, curl in, breathe deep, let the world fade. You've made it through the night.